Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes slave of Rias Highschool DxD part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. In a currently unknown place, somewhere in the wilderness, there was a flash of light that quickly died down as quickly as it shone and revealed a beautiful woman standing in the exact same place who was now inspecting her destination. Said woman looked like she was in her mid to late 20s, stood at an impressive 178 centimeters tall, had fair complexion, and long sun-kissed blonde hair that reached her thighs with two chest-length bangs, framing her beautiful heart-shaped face that complemented her blue eyes perfectly with the bangs on her forehead parted to the left side using an orange clip. She was wearing a pair of black shorts that ended just above her knees, a red top which hugged her sexy body. She had a pair of black ninja sandals adorning her feet. A red cloak with black flame pattern at the end that reached to her ankles. She had a voluptuous body that the ladies would kill to have. She had huge DD cup that were firm and not saggy, a slim waist, a round butt and legs for days. She had all the right curves at all the right places. She looked like a goddess in human form. This woman was Uzumaki Natsumi, daughter of the 4th Hokage Namikaze Minato and the red hot-blooded habanero Uzumaki Kushina. She herself held a lot of titles throughout her lifetime: Nanadame Hokage, Child of Prophecy, Hero of the Hidden Leaf to name a few. The latest one was Yubi no Okami, though only a handful of people knew her by that title, and all of them had long since passed away. Once she was done inspecting her surroundings, she extended her senses in order to try and find some sort of life in this place. Once she detected a large number of life signatures some few kilometers down south, she started walking in that direction. Well, luckily I am not on some lifeless planet, she finally said to herself, glad to have an enormous luck when it mattered. A new start to life, she muttered to herself while walking, remembering her reason for being in this world. 103 years ago, in the elemental nations, a peaceful world that she and her comrades had worked so hard towards for 15 years after the 4th Shinobi World War, was under threat again by a guy from the same clan, Otsutsuki. Though, this one, called Isshiki Otsutsuki, was much stronger than Kagaya. Even though he wasn't at full power, as he was using a weaker body as his vessel, having lost his original due to a betrayal from Kagaya apparently, he had quickly dominated Natsumi and Sasuke, the two strongest shinobi of their generation, and arguably ever, without much effort. Sasuke had lost his Rinnegan in the initial skirmish, and Natsumi had lost her artificial right hand soon after. In Ishiki's personal dimension, a man was hovering some ways above the ground, staring down two individuals who had clearly seen better days. He had pale skin and a long curving horn which grew from his left brow and wrapped around the back of his skull before jutting outward from his right temple, resembling a crown. The iris and pupil of his right eye is yellow with a black wheel-like pattern with 8 spokes coming out of the center, while his left eye was a Byakugan. He bore matching tattoos on his chest and back. On his chest was a vertical column of 6 Magatama topped with an emblem resembling a black mallet across his chest, and on his back was a vertical column of 6 smaller black mallet emblems. His hair, right eyebrow and goatee were pale blue, trimmed short with unusual alternating zigzag patterns resembling the hair parts worn by other members of his clan, while his fingernails and toenails were painted black. He was dressed in an elegant, slim-cut, white long-sleeved tailcoat with maroon lining and cuffs and an oversized collar that folded back upon itself over a pair of baggy black pants that covered his bare feet. The coat was embroidered with patterns matching his tattoos, with vertical columns comprised of 8 Magatama designs on the sleeves and a similar pattern on the back, with a second Magatama replaced with the black mallet emblem. This was Isshiki Otsutsuki. One of the two figures in front of him was of Natsumi, who was wearing an orange jacket and black shinobi pants. She had her shoulder-length hair tied in a low ponytail, with 2 bangs framing her blood-stained and bruised face and smaller bangs covering her forehead. The clothes had holes in various places where she had been impaled, most noticeably her abdomen, near the shoulder and a couple in her thighs. She was missing her right arm, having lost it during the start of the fight. Even though Kurama had healed her mostly, she still had bruises all over her body, along with some still fresh blood from all the cuts and stab wounds that stained her clothes. The other figure was of Sasuke Uchiha. He was wearing a gray, long-sleeved collared shirt over which he wears a periwinkle vest. He also wears black pants, a purple belt and dark gray fingerless glove on his right hand. His attire wasn't in pristine condition either, having cuts at various places with the blood from those wounds staining his clothes. The left half of his face was covered in blood, having lost his Rinnegan to a stab wound inflicted by their opponent. Both Natsumi and Sasuke were panting heavily from their current fight, but still in their fighting stance, glaring up at their opponent. Why do you continue to resist? It's not like you have a chance, questioned Isshiki, amused by the fight put up by the two shinobi. Well, we wouldn't know until we try everything, answered the Nanadame Hokage before activating her own Mangekyo Sharingan. Her once blue eyes bled their way to crimson with a black six-pronged shuriken pattern, showing that she had some Uchiha blood in her veins from her father's side, as was revealed to her by Kurama when she first activated the Dijutsu. She continued to channel some more chakra into her eyes, morphing them into something else. Her eyeballs turned purple with several concentric circles around her pupil. The first two of those circles had 3 equidistant tomos along the circumference. She had gained the Rinnegan shortly after activating the Manjikyu Sharingan when she thought she had lost her now husband Hiroto against Nagato all those years ago. The Rinnegan was a result of the mixing of lineage from both Indra and Asura Otsutsuki through her Uchiha and Uzumaki heritage. Her left arm then changed into an energy cannon and she fired a chakra beam towards the Otsutsuki. Isshiki dodged the beam with ease and was in front of the blonde Hokage in a split second, punching her in the gut hard enough for her to cough up blood and get launched into a distance from the sheer force. Sasuke took this chance to engage the all-powerful Otsutsuki in a close-range combat so as to provide Natsumi to some time to recuperate. Even though successful in his objective, he was barely able to keep up with Isshiki. Meanwhile, in the distance, Natsumi was getting up slowly. She had been in this dimension for days before Sasuke, Boruto and Kawaki had come up to get her out and they ended up fighting Isshiki again. We won't be able to defeat him like this, we will perish before we are able to land even a single decisive hit, Kurama commented in a serious manner in her mindscape. I know, but we have to try something. It would have been so much easier if we could just seal him like we did with Kagaya, answered back Natsumi, trying to think of some way to defeat their adversary. We both know sealing him will do jack shit. The Kama has the potential to summon his soul to whoever has been bestowed with the damn thing, whether it is sealed or not. And we don't know just how many of such individuals are out there in the world, stated Kurama. Natsumi knew this. I know. Even while tough, it's easier to kill him than search of some needles in haystack. The only way to kill this bastard is by overpowering him. I do have a solution, though I doubt you will like it, Kurama mentioned in all seriousness. This had Natsumi's attention. She had recuperated enough and was about to go back to the fight, but instead ventured into her mindscape in order to listen to her partner. Soon she was facing the giant kitsune, looking up into his eyes, urging him to continue his idea. Kurama is a red-orange colored kitsune with black fur around his red eyes that stretch up to his ears and 9 long swiping tails. He also has an upper body structure of a human, complete with opposable thumbs on his clawed hands. Kurama, knowing there wasn't enough time, continued explaining his idea. We tailed beasts are just made of chakra, which has been given form and gained consciousness. As such, we don't have a physical body and can't emerge together and no. Stop. I don't want to hear any more. Realizing at least one of the end results of the technique, Natsumi interrupted the giant fox from explaining further and turned away, ready to get out and join her former teammate for the fight of their lives, literally. Why don't you just use that power of your Rinnegan? That should let you know of any potential ways to defeat Isshiki, if any besides mine exists, Kurama tried to reason with his Jinchuriki. That stopped Natsumi in her tracks, her eyes widening in realization of the giant fox was talking about. She turned back and looked Kurama in the eyes before replying, are you sure it's a good idea to use that? Hagoromo Jiji specially warned me not to use it unless there are no other options, as that has the potential to create more chaos. I have only used that once, and look at the aftermath, it's already much more chaotic than what we anticipated, she added, implying the presence of Isshiki was her fault. Apart her, only Kurama knew of the technique. It would be really chaotic if word got out what she could do. Kurama knew she was right to worry. It wasn't something that should be taken lightly. The greatest of powers have the greatest of consequences. Then don't use it for long time periods like you did last time, maybe just for the next 20 min. That should be enough, he replied back. But, what if the blonde Hokage started but was quickly interjected by the giant kitsune? We can worry about that later. There won't be anything left to worry about if we don't take our chances now. Natsumi pondered for a moment on the idea before accepting that her partner was right. Taking care of the prison problem should be her first priority. Looking into the fox's eyes and nodding, she turned around and left the mindscape. Once outside, she quickly made a single-handed sign and created a shadow clone. You know what to do, she ordered her clone, who immediately activated the Manjekyo Sharingan. Pamui the clone whispered the name of technique and was disappeared within the spiral of the technique into her pocket dimension. Natsumi, on her part, focused on the battle between Sasuke and Isshiki, ready to enter the fray in order to help her teammate. Let us go and do our part till then, Kurama, she said out loud to her tenant, who responded with a smirk of his own. Yes. Let's. She was then covered in a golden chakra shroud of her 6-path sage mode. With her Rinnegan activated, she sped towards ongoing battle. It only took her a fraction of a second to cover the distance, and with Isshiki being distracted by Sasuke, she was able to land a punch on his face. Though, that didn't have the desired effect, and the Otsutsuki simply grabbed her hand and threw her against her raven-haired teammate. The two stumbled for a bit before each of them regained their footing and came to a stop. "What took you so long?" asked Sasuke. "Just having a brainstorming session with my tenant," replied the blonde shinobi before adding, "and before you ask, no, we don't have a plan. At least not for the next minute. Do you have any?" "No, I couldn't think of anything either, and what do you mean for the next minute?" Sasuke asked back. Natsumi ignored his question and just jumped into another melee round with the Otsutsuki, hoping to buy some time for her clone. Sasuke just shook his head in frustration before following her lead and engaging Isshiki with her, just hoping to get a breakthrough. Meanwhile in the pocket dimension, as soon as the clone entered her pocket dimension, she was greeted by sons Boruto and Kawaki, who had been passing time and worry in the pocket dimension since the start of the fight when their mother had ordered them to take refuge in the dimension. Boruto has spiky blonde hair, blue eyes and 2 whisker markings on each of his cheeks, a trait he shares with his sister because of being an offspring of a Jinchuriki in connection with its tenant. His hairstyle resembles a leaf, his ahogue serving as the stem. He was wearing a black tracksuit that had a red fire symbol on the left, a symbol that resembled a bolt on the back, and dark pink stripes along the sides of his pants. He had a comma on the palm of his right hand that resembled a black diamond. Kawaki, on the other hand, had gray eyes and bushy black hair, the sides of which were shaven and blonde in color. He also has a tattoo of the Roman numeral H under his left eye, a pair of piercings on his right eyebrow, and stud earrings. He was wearing a green shirt with a blue sleeveless vest jacket with gray stripe patterns on the collar and dark pants with a studded belt. He had a comma on the palm of his left hand in the shape of a diamond. "How are things going outside, Mom?" asked Boruto. "I am not gonna lie, they don't look so good. But don't worry, we will figure something out. That's why I am here. Now give me some alone time so that I can concentrate," replied Natsumi's clone in a serious manner, clearly ordering the two not to disturb her further. The clone then proceeded to sit in a meditative posture as if to gather natural energy, but instead activated a Rinnegan and muttered Toki no Maiko. Mirai. A tsunami of possible future scenarios started to surface in her mind one after the other. As suggested by Kurama, she was only watching 20 min into the future so as to not drastically change the distant future. The first and last time she used this technique was just before the Fourth Shinobi World War in order to find a route with minimum fighting and bloodshed. It was a success in the short term, but the consequences of a mortal knowing the possible futures caused a ripple effect which 15 years after her use has resulted in a tsunami in the form of one Isshiki Otsutsuki, who she hadn't seen in any of the futures she had observed, and she had observed a lot of them. Boruto and Kawaki were intently observing her. It had been about a minute with her in that meditative state. Suddenly she deactivated her Rinnegan and stood up abruptly, surprising the two teens before she proceeded to dispel herself, leaving the two dumbfounded but worried teens in the dimension. Back with the original, Natsumi and Sasuke were engaged in a melee battle with Isshiki, barely keeping up even with 2 versus 1, when the memories of the clone hit her like brick, making her lose concentration, which resulted in her overstepping while trying to land a punch and Isshiki dodging the attack even easier than before, catching her overstretched hand, throw her away, while Sasuke continued to try and hit him, failing each time. Natsumi stumbled for a few meters grunting along, before catching her foothold and coming to stop, just mulling over the information she got from her clone and grimacing. "How many, this time?" asked Kurama knowing what was going on in her head. 14,605," she replied somberly. "How many did we win?" He prodded further. "One," she whispered back. "Using my idea?" he asked further. Natsumi's silence was everything he needed to know. The blonde didn't know how to reply to that, though she didn't need to. "But, you guys can't." Natsumi tried to fight back, but was interrupted before she could put forward her argument. "You saw north of 14 million scenarios, the only way to win this is using this method. Either we use this and sacrifice a few mindless beasts or we all end up dead. It is an easy choice." Natsumi was torn between the choices she had and already had tears welling up in her eyes thinking of the consequences. Seeing this, Kurama decided to make the choice instead of her. "I am summoning the others, and I am sure they will come to the same conclusion as well." Even that damn Tanuki. Saying this, Kurama cut off the connection and proceeded to connect to his siblings, relaying the information they had. Natsumi on her part decided to honor her friend's commitment and rub the tears of her eyes, just as Sasuke decided to join her, not of free will, as he had been thrown in that direction as well. "Kurama has an idea. We need to buy him a couple of minutes without dying in the process," Natsumi relayed Kurama's message to her teammate. "Easier said than done," grunted the Uchiha as they both stared down the Otsutsuki who was leisurely closing in on them, not at all doubting his victory and just reveling in amusement that this fight brought him. "I ask again, why do you continue to resist? Just give up and hand over your sons. They are all I need from you. You are otherwise worthless to me. I will spare your lives if you hand them over." Isshiki taunted them. This enraged Natsumi. What kind of parent hands over their children to a maniac? It doesn't matter if one of them adopted, they're both my children and I will die before I hand them over. Too bad for you then, I am gonna beat you down and then proceed to take your sons in front of you while you helplessly lay in the pool of your own blood. I will then kill you slowly in front of them. That ought to break them as well, Isshiki countered with a sadistic smile. Natsumi was about to let loose in an enraged state, but she suddenly felt a tug from her mindscape, signaling her that Kurama was ready. Making a single-handed sign, she bellowed Tajuwu Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, summoning over 1,000 copies of herself, who proceeded to attack the Otsutsuki, buying time for the original. Natsumi activated her Mangekyo, opened a portal to her pocket dimension. Sasuke, come with me. This shouldn't take long. Nodding to her, he followed her into the portal, which then closed behind them. All the while, the clones tried to overwhelm the Otsutsuki with their numbers, trying to buy the original some time. Inside the pocket dimension, both Boruto and Kawaki sprinted towards the two heavily wounded shinobi. You both are back, did we win? Asked an hopeful Kawaki. Unfortunately no, but apparently, your mother has an idea that might help. We are just recuperating for a bit, Sasuke answered back, making the three look towards the only Kunoichi in the group. I don't have one, Kurama has one. You guys rest for a bit and let me go and see him. In the meanwhile, saying this, she just sat down cross-legged and entered her mindscape, not wasting any time. Inside Natsumi's mindscape, once inside, she could see all the tailed beasts circling around her and looking at her. The Ichibi, Shukaku, is a sandy brown colored tanuki with black, dark blue in the anime, cursed seal markings all over his face, body, and tail. He has a jagged concave mouth with no tongue, and the sclerae of his eyes are black, with yellow irides and pupils that each takes the shape of a black four-pointed star with 4 black dots around it. The Nibi, Matatabi, is two-tailed cat and is completely engulfed in blue and black flames. She has heterochromatic eyes, the right being yellow and the left being green. The Sanbi, Isobu, resembles a large turtle, but with a crab-like shell, spikes all over his body, and 3 shrimp-like tails. Under his shell, he has red, muscle-like tissue. He has a pair of human-like arms and hands, but no hind legs. His face is concealed between a large forehead and lower jaw, both of which have spikes. His eyes are red and have crimson pupils. The Yonbi, Son Goku, is a red-furred and green-skinned monkey with a body build of a gorilla. He has eyes with yellow irides and white pupils, spike-like protrusions along the length of its tails, elongated blunt fangs, and 2 long horns curving upwards on his forehead like a crown. In his mouth, Son doesn't have a tongue, but has an opening that is shaped like a dome volcano. The Gobi, Kakuo, resembles a white horse, but with a dolphin's head. He has 2 pointed long horns and 3 shorter horns in front. The ends of his horns, hooves, and tails are tan, with some of the same colored spots before the tan areas of his horns and hooves. He also has red markings under his dark blue-green eyes. The Rakubi, Seiken, is an enormous white bipedal slug with stubby arms, feet and 6 long tails. He has 2 prominent optical tentacles for eyes and hole-like openings as a mouth. His entire body is covered in a thick slimy substance. The Nanabi, Jime, resembles a blue armored rhinoceros beetle, with 6 of her 7 tails resembling green insect wings, along with an actual 7th tail, all growing from the end of the abdomen. The stem of the tail is green, but the wings are orange. Her eyes seem to be covered by a helmet-like skull, from inside of which an orange glow can be seen. She also has spike protrusions on her shoulders and a row of slits on each shoulder, and 6 legs, 3 on each side. The legs are also covered by the blue armor, with the exception of extreme ends which are green in color. She has 2 pincers with 3 parts on her face, covering a mouth full of sharp teeth. On her back behind its head, it has a large 2-section horn protrusion. Daiuki, the Hachibi, is an Ushi Oni with 4 long horns on his head, similar to that of a Jacob sheep. Though, the horns were not complete, having been destroyed in previous battles and had not completely regrown yet. He also has straight teeth. He also has a muscular upper body structure, with a hunched back similar to an American bison, arms with spiked protrusions on the elbows, and hands with opposable thumbs like that of a human. Instead of hind legs, his lower half consists of 8 tails, which resemble the cephalopod arms of an octopus. And finally, the Kyuubi, Kurama, completed the circle. It was Seiken who decided to speak first. Kurama has filled us in Natsumi Uzumaki, gaining her attention, and we agree with him. We would like to save this world our father risked his own life for and the one where our one true friend resides. All the Bijuus nodded at his words, showing that shared his thoughts. This brought fresh tears to Natsumi's eyes, mainly because she was overwhelmed by the fact that the Bijuu considered her precious enough to sacrifice themselves to save her and her world. But she still couldn't bring herself to do that. I still don't want to sacrifice you guys. As you said yourself, you guys are my friends. I can't ask you to do that for me. She tried to argue back again in hopes that they will back down. She did not need to show her strong side which she was showing to her kids so as to not make them worry. She could be more free with the Bijuu. Natsumi, it was Son Goku this time, prompting her to look in his direction. Each of us has lived for a long time in this world and have seen a lot of things. For most of us, you were our first friend, the first person who understood us apart from our father. We can't just sit back and watch as you are in danger. This idiot fox boy, grumbled Kurama, but was promptly ignored. Goku continued, should have called us sooner, I don't know what took him so long. Thank you for everything you did for us and for being our friend. Now it's time for us to do something for you. As the monkey said, it's time for us to do something. And we would do it regardless of your opinion, so you better buckle up for the ride anyways. You would have done the same thing if you were in our shoes, wouldn't you? Asked Kurama with a smirk, knowing he was right. Natsumi knew it was true and she decided to stay silent, just smiling sadly at the thought of losing some of her friends. She turned towards Shukaku, Matatabi, turning towards the respective Biju as she said their names out loud, Isobu, Son Goku, Koku, Seiken, Chimei, Jayuki, Kurama turning for the final time to look up at her oldest partner with a sad smile, I am glad I got to meet you all. I am happy I got to befriend you all. And I am really sad that this is how we are gonna say goodbyes. But, I can promise you two things, for as long as I am alive, you all will never be forgotten. This brought on sad smiles to all their faces, and I am gonna make that bastard pay. And you know that I never go back on your promises. The Biju was finished for her, increasing the tears that were now freely flowing from her eyes. Okay, we don't have much more time, let me explain what is gonna happen, even if you know, so that we know all us are on same page, and I know you have most probably skipped the consequences, and our reasoning. Kurama stole her attention, Natsumi nodded at him. She did see a lot of possible futures, but she didn't have enough time to look into the details. She was fighting for her and her people's life at the same time after all. All of us are gonna merge with you, essentially making you a 10-tailed yokai. And we know you are gonna be a yokai instead of a tailed beast, as you are made of flesh and blood, unlike us. Us merging with you would just restructure your existing body so as handle the extra power. The fox continued. This didn't surprise her, she had already seen this part. The reason we aren't just making you are the 10 tails Jinchuriki is simply because you won't be able to use all of our power effectively in that case. Your body can only take so much of strain before it decides to stop the flow of power. Natsumi nodded in understanding. Even if it was much less now, she did feel some strain from using Kurama's chakra. She can imagine that her body will be a bottleneck if she were to channel all of the Bijuu's chakra through her, and hence the output will be much less than what it should be. We don't exactly know what type of yokai you will be, though I am sure you know that particular answer. The fox continued. Natsumi nodded again, she knew. But we do know, you will be a Juubi of some kind as we were originally part of a Juubi before we spirated. Though on a power scale, you will be much stronger than the Juubi we have fought before, mainly because having my chakra in your pathways from birth and having housed all of us for a short amount of time has increased your chakra capacity to slightly larger than my own. This caused Natsumi's eyes to widen. This was news to her. And the fact that it will all be yours to use, you will be able to use more of it than what you would be if you simply became our Jinchuriki. The fox explained further. Natsumi was about to ask something, but was quickly shut down when Kurama continued, and I know what you are gonna ask, that why don't we, the Bijuu, fight him ourselves, as we can use a 100% of our chakra by ourselves, right? Natsumi nodded at that. She smiled slightly, thinking her tenant knew her so well. Hiding side by side only adds our power at best. It was Jayuki who answered the question. You already a Kyuubi in terms of power, maybe slightly stronger than Kurama himself. You were fighting with the 6-path Sage mode activated alongside your Uchiha teammate without any fruits. We are not gonna win with numbers, as individually, we can be countered, but when merged, our powers stack together, they add together, and then amplified on top of that. There was a reason that the Juubi was stronger than all of us combined. Natsumi nodded again. Now that it was said out loud, one of the memories of the clone who saw the futures resurfaced. It was of them doing the exact thing that Jayuki and Kurama mentioned and fighting together and failing miserably. She had just seen the one winning future after the clone has passed on its conclusion in summary, as she was still in a fight then. She turned to Kurama again, continued the explanation, we don't seem to have much time, it's only been a minute and half my clones are already gone. Isshiki has sped up as well. A tick mark appeared on Kurama's forehead, it was you who interrupted me, you damn brat. Nevertheless, he calmed down and continued, the next part is all speculation as you will be the first human to be merged with a Bijuu. You will most probably gain our individual traits and specialties, apart from gaining some new powers of your own. But you most probably already knew that as well, and Natsumi acknowledged that as well. The final thing you will gain is an incredible healing factor, better than what you have now because of me. So incredible that I doubt anything short of vaporizing you would work if anyone would want to kill you, Kurama added. Natsumi whistled at that. Awesome, sounds cool. No wait, she realized something, wouldn't that make me almost an immortal? She asked, dreading the answer. Fortunately for you, the answer to that is no. But unfortunately, I am not exactly sure, Kurama answered with the truth. My speculation is you will still age and die of old age someday. But, your new healing factor will slow down the aging process to a crawl at best. You will most likely end up living for thousands of years at least. Natsumi's expression said it all. She was dreading it before having to sacrifice her friends, but now she was re-evaluating her decision again. Even if it's not set in stone, there is a high probability of this happening. I know it's gonna be hard, kid. But, this is the only option we have. It's either this or we lose, you lose everything. Kurama tried to encourage her, so she stops doubting this decision. I know, Kurama. I know, the blonde woman tried to console herself as well, readying herself for the inevitable. Just so you know, father mentioned this to us, that there are infinite number of worlds out there. There will be one out there that might satisfy all your needs. You just need to explore to find it, added Kuoh, trying to console his friend by providing her with some info she could use in the future. Yeah, I remember him mentioning seeing glimpses of some of those worlds due to his connection with the Ten Tails and Rinnegan. Isobu extended the information further. This consoled Natsumi a little. Thanks guys. I will try to be positive about things. I promise. She smiled a little. It wouldn't do her good second guessing everything. This is the only option. It's this or I would have failed everyone else as well. She consoled herself back to normal, for now. That's the Natsumi Uzumaki, we know. Always positive, exclaimed Chimay, making Natsumi and the others smile a little. Oh, and our souls will stick around for a few minutes. So, if you want to show us his decimation, I would advise you to quickly dispatch him, instead to taking your time, Kurama added. You bet, I will. I will annihilate him, for your viewing pleasure, Natsumi smirked, having wiped away her tears and smiling up at them. Let's do this then, all the Bijuus exclaimed simultaneously, before each of them made a contact with the Bijuus on either side of them. The whole place was illuminated in a bright light, before the light started condensing in on the center, revealing a 10-tailed figure. Outside Natsumi's mindscape, Sasuke, Boruto and Kawaki waited patiently with Natsumi to get out of her mindscape when suddenly, her body started emitting a bright light, covering her figure entirely and forcing them to shield their eyes, lest they go blind. They uncovered their eyes once when the light dies down and were gobsmacked what they witnessed. Natsumi still occupied the place, but she was different. Her body had healed itself of all injuries, which even Kurama could not heal. She had even regrown her missing right arm. Golden wolf ears had replaced her normal human ones on top of her head, and she had 10 wolf tails, with golden fur that matched her hair and ears, sprouting from her lower back, lazily moving about behind her. Her once purple Rinnegan was now blood red with a third circle from the center, also gaining a 3-tomo pattern. Only Sasuke knew what this was, as neither of the other two occupants of the pocket dimension had ever seen this before. The Rin Sharingan, the strongest Taijutsu in existence. It wasn't everything, she was now exuding power that none of them had ever felt in their lives. It was Sasuke who spoke first. It's still you, right, Natsumi? He questioned, even though this person looked like his teammate, she didn't feel like her. Yes, it's me, she smiled at her teammate and her sons. Though, Sasuke could tell, there was some sadness hidden in that smile, but he didn't probe into it further. She will let them know once everything is over. Before they could question her any further, we don't have much time, Isshiki has already almost destroyed my mini army of clones. I need to get out there before he decides to get to the elemental nations and wreak havoc, the blonde said. Okay, let's go. Sasuke moved forward, ready to exit the dimension with the blonde Hokage. Natsumi raised her hand towards him to stop him. No, only I will be going alone, you stay here. You already have taken a lot of damage and is no condition to continue any further, not that I need any help now. Sasuke would have rejected the idea normally, knowing full well who they were up against, but knew from her aura that she would be fine. In fact, she would be more than fine. So, he just nodded and decided to sit down and relax. Give him hell, Mom, Boruto cheered her mother. Natsumi could still see some worry in her son's eyes, but she also saw that he had confidence in her as well. She was about to reply back before Kawaki decided to speak up. Mom, this surprised Natsumi very much as it was the first time he had called her that, despite her asking him for this several times over the last year. Come back safely, he continued. Natsumi smiled and moved towards her two sons, before taking both of them in her embrace, and finally spoke, yes, I will give him hell and come back safely, to you, and to Hiroto. Don't worry. Having said her piece, she broke the embrace and opened a Kamui portal to Ishiki's dimension. Now that she had Rin Sharingan, she didn't need to activate her other forms of eyes to gain access to their powers. Wait for me here. It shouldn't take long. Saying this, she flashed a smile to the three occupants of her dimensions, before quickly exiting the dimension through the portal. In Ishiki's personal dimension, just when Isshiki managed to destroy the last clone, he sensed a disturbance in the air just behind him. So, you finally decided to show yourself, huh? I was getting bored with these clones. Not that you can do any B. He stopped midway when he turned around to see Natsumi exiting the portal. He didn't need to observe the changes in her appearance to tell him that she had changed. The amount of pressure her chakra was now exerting on him was immense. Let's finish this. I don't have much time, exclaimed Natsumi before channeling some chakra through her legs and launching herself towards her foe. Much quicker than the Otsutsuki could react, she had covered the distance between them and had stabbed a kunai through his right eye. That's for Shukaku, she exclaimed, making said Bijuu smile in her mindscape. She didn't relent and continued her assault by crouching down and landing an uppercut in his chin, launching him up in the air. That one was for Matatabi, she exclaimed again and jumped after him. Before Isshiki even had time to comprehend what was happening, she was above him in the air, with her right leg up above her head, which she then brought down on his head, sending him to the ground. That was for Isobu, she said before flying down towards the point Isshiki was falling. She reached there before Isshiki and proceeded to roundhouse kick him in the cheek before he even reached the ground, sending him flying off into the distance. That's for Son Goku. She continued presenting each of her hits to one of her friends before she launched herself again toward the now one-eyed man. She was onto him just as he had managed to regain some of his footing, but he didn't have time to react as Natsumi proceeded to jab another kunai into his other eye, effectively blinding him. That's for Kuoh, you bastard, she continued before punching the now blind man in his stomach, making him double over and cough blood. That's for Seiken, she muttered this time, since he was close enough to hear her. She gathered some chakra in her right palm before hitting the Otsutsuki with an open palm thrust strong enough to send him flying several feet away, simultaneously applying a seal on him using Jayuki's ink techniques. Tamashi no Sakubaku, she muttered the name of the technique. She had initially designed the seal for stopping Orochimaru from possessing others' bodies, though she never got a chance to use it till now. That was for Chimay, she exclaimed and proceeded to clap her hands together in order to use the technique that had created the moon of their planet. This is for Jayuki. Chibaku Tensei, she shouted, activating the technique and creating a small ball of really high gravity near Ishiki's body, which had now started to attract big chunks of rocks that had broken up from the solid ground they were fighting on. You need to finish him, Natsumi, and not just seal him away, warned Kurama from her mindscape. Don't worry, have you not noticed I haven't gifted you with a hit yet? I am gonna finish him off, replied back Natsumi, easing the worry that each of the Bijuu were feeling. I hope it's grand, then smirked Kurama. Yes, it will be. It's a new technique that I just acquired with the Rincharingan. You guys will love it, Natsumi smirked. She was gonna use the technique for the first time, but she had already seen herself use it. Their little chat was interrupted by the voice of Isshiki, who was trying to free himself from the technique, but failing to do so. Do you think this will stop me forever? His lower body was already trapped in a formation of rocks, with one of his hands caught in it as well. He was using his remaining free hand to try and claw himself out, failing in doing so though. Even if you succeed in sealing me away, I will return soon, and his monologue was cut short by a boulder that hit him in the face, quickly joined by a few others, effectively burying him in the center of a ball of rocks, which had started to resemble a moon. Oh man, we were just spared an excellent speech, said Natsumi sarcastically, earning a snicker from the Bijuus, which quickly turned into a full-blown laughter, in which she happily joined as she started levitating, the ground under her feet having been attracted by the gravity of her technique. In the meantime, the ball of rubble was getting bigger and bigger and had now started to resemble the moon. Natsumi soon stopped laughing and turned serious. She extended her right hand forward, her palm facing upwards, and then moved it upwards slowly, controlling the gravity ball at the center of the moon. The artificial moon started to move upwards with her gesture, while continuing to get bigger and bigger. Soon enough, the moon was obscured by the clouds, so Natsumi decided to follow after it to make sure it was ready for her final attack. Susanoo, she bellowed, forming an orange perfect Susanoo in order to protect her. She continued on till she was above the clouds and had a clear view of the moon. In a couple more minutes, the moon was complete. It was now as big as the one back in their world. Focusing her eyesight on the moon, she channeled chakra to her right Rincharingan. This is for you, Kurama, she shouted, hoping that the bastard whom she could still sense at the center of the moon was able to listen to her. Iri no Nai Hakai, she called out the name of the technique, activating and converting the entire mass of the moon into pure energy, which expanded in a blinding explosion, vaporizing Isshiki instantly and continued to expand outwards, ready to destroy everything that might come into contact. And, he is dead, vaporized into oblivion. How did you guys like that? Asked Natsumi to the occupants of her mindscape, really wanting to see their expressions. The tailed beasts didn't respond for a couple of seconds, trying to get their jaws back to their original places after they had comically fallen to the ground in amazement of the pure destruction. Kurama was first to compose himself. Awesome, he exclaimed, excited to see this level of destruction, something I approve of, definitely. The other tailed beasts just nodded in approval, too excited to say anything. The blast energy and shockwave soon reached where Natsumi was observing from, but didn't damage anything on her Susanoo and went past her towards the ground, annihilating it as well once it struck there. Natsumi for her part decided to venture into her mindscape, ready to say her final goodbyes to her friends. Just the thought of it brought back tears into her eyes. She didn't want them to go, but she couldn't do anything about it. Inside Natsumi's mindscape, she was once again at the center of a ring formed by the tail beasts, who were all staring down at her. "Don't cry, Natsumi, send us off," with a smile Kurama started, trying to console her former Jinchuriki. "Yeah, we have lived a long life, and I guess this is our well-deserved rest," Son Goku added. "And the last thing we want to see before this leaving this plane of existence is the smiling face of our only friend, not one filled with tears," Matatabi added further. Natsumi wiped her tears with her hands before looking up at them again, trying to smile as best she could. "Okay, I will try. I can't promise this though." Everyone went silent after that, creating a heavy somber atmosphere. "Before we go off, I just have one question," Shukaku said, trying to break the tense atmosphere. "I know those ears and tails belong to a wolf, but why wolf? None of us are related to that." Everyone started pondering the same question. All of them had that question, but somewhere in the excitement of the events, it was forgotten. Kurama decided to explain. "I think I can answer that. Wolves are known to be strong-willed, loyal to their pack, and with strong spirits. Those are the characteristics that Natsumi most strongly exhibits. Hence, when she was transformed into a yokai, she became the Jubi no Okami." "Oh, here I thought I was be a fox for sure," muttered Natsumi, getting a smile from Kurama. "Though, it makes me happy to know that you wanted to be Kitsune yokai. I think wolf suits you better," making Natsumi smile at the compliment. Suddenly all the tailed beasts started levitating. "I think it's time for us to go," Chimay said. This brought on fresh tears into Natsumi's eyes, but she smiled nonetheless. She wanted to send them off with a smile as it was their last wish. She started turning towards each of the Bijuu, showing them her gratitude and sadness through her smile. "Shukaku, Matatabi, Isobu, Son Goku, Kakuo, Seiken, Chimay, Jayuki," she settled on Kurama. "Kurama. I want to thank you all for what you did for me. I am gonna miss you guys. You all are my precious friends, even though some of us didn't start on good terms. I will always remember you. You are our friend as well, Natsumi. And we are grateful to you, more than you will ever acknowledge. Well, that's what makes you, you. Thank you for being our friend. Thank you for everything. Thank you. And goodbye," smiled Kurama sadly. All the tailed beasts smiled down at her before they all vanished. Natsumi raised her hand in the air towards her longtime partner, as if to stop him from leaving before breaking down into tears. "Goodbye, my friends. Goodbye, Kurama." Outside Natsumi's mindscape, once she opened her eyes, she was once again surrounded by the orange chakra of her Susanoo, though, outside that construct, she recognized that she was back in the elemental nations, hovering in space somewhere above the fire country. "It seems the dimension got destroyed by the energy, and I was transported back," she thought, before she activated Kamui and disappeared in her pocket dimension, leaving behind the Susanoo to dissolve in the air. In Natsumi's pocket dimension, she appeared in front of her teammate and her sons in her dimension, deactivated her Taijutsu, morphing them back into her blue eyes, and gave them the good news, before explaining to them everything that happened. She left the dimension destroying stuff and the future viewing stuff and the extended life period out of the explanation though. It was best to leave some things in the dark. Before leaving for the elemental nations, she ordered them not to say anything about this to anyone without her permission. It would be quite dangerous if the truth of a being as powerful as her got out into the open. She didn't want to be worshipped or worse yet, feared for her powers. Once all was said and done, she proceeded to apply a seal onto the back of her right hand, using the ink technique she gained from Jayuki, sealing her newfound powers preventing people from discovering them. A seal in the form of number 10 appeared on the back of her right hand, and her wolf tails and ears retracted into her body. Her original human ears forming back. They then went back to the elemental nations. Back in the elemental nations. Once they were back, they traveled back to Konohagakure before each of them resumed their daily lives. Natsumi did decide to tell everything to her husband Hiroto, as she didn't want to keep him in the dark. She was a bit afraid to see his reaction though. She was already dreading outliving everyone she loved, but it was a price she had to pay in order to save everyone and a price she was willing to pay as well. Her husband, being the sweetheart he is, just smiled and hugged her, saying he was fine with her choices, bringing tears of joy in her eyes. He also consoled her regarding the things she had and will have to endure in the future, and made it known that, should she actually were to live for that long, she should live happily, find new people and help others instead of moping around. Natsumi promised her husband to follow his advice. She had after all promised the Bijuu something similar as well. Everything went smoothly after that. She did have to call in a cage summit, relaying back the events of the fight and the sacrifice of the tailed beasts in order to stop the Otsutsuki. She did change the story quite a bit. In this version, the tailed beasts fought side by side with her before sacrificing themselves in self-detonation, taking the Otsutsuki out with them. Over the next decade, it became apparent that the part about her extended life that she was worried about did come true. Even considering her Uzumaki lineage, she still hadn't aged a single day, appearance-wise. And her healing factor was indeed off the charts. Well, in hindsight, she already knew about the latter. She did in fact regrow an entire arm before her annihilation of Isshiki Otsutsuki. She had to develop a seal that helped her conceal her true appearance from the outside world, preventing other people from knowing that her aging has slowed down to a crawl. The seal basically made her look as if she were aging normally. And since it was seal that concealed her appearance, she had no risk of it being detected by a Dijutsu. Several decades passed peacefully like this. Natsumi had transferred the Hokage hat to Konohamaru, who himself had chosen a successor in her goddaughter Sarada. Natsumi had lost all of her friends to old age, as well as a lot of their children as well. She had disappeared off though after Hiroto had passed, having faked her death in order to avoid getting people to search for her. She had spent a lot of time at Mount Mayaboku with the toads, just doing different things from training to lazing around to playing with the young ones. But she did return from time to time, discreetly, in order to check on her kids. Though, when Himawari's son, last of her grandkids, passed away, she didn't want to feel like living in the elemental nations anymore and decided to work on seal that can transport her to a different world at random. That random part was important. She thought that to truly enjoy the thrill of exploration, the new place shouldn't be selected on her thought process. It took a couple of months for her to perfect the seal. She said her goodbyes to the toads, showing them her gratitude for harboring her for so long, and then went back to the elemental nations in order to use the seal. She was in a forest near Konoha. The sky was covered with dark clouds, showing that it was gonna rain soon. Perfect, smiled Natsumi, having completed the engraving of the seal on the ground using a stick. The rain will remove any traces of the seal in a couple of minutes, preventing anyone else to use it. It was a random transporter after all. Even she didn't know what kind of place she was gonna end up with. But she trusted her gigantic luck. Anyone else might end up dead after transporting to the middle of universe in the vacuum of space. But I trust my luck enough to leave my fate in its hands, she added before standing in the center of the seal. She poured a lot of chakra in the seal, which began to shine brightly. The blonde former Hokage was covered in the light before it died out, revealing an empty space at its center. It started pouring soon, removing all traces of the seal as intended. Present time. While still reliving the memories, Natsumi had reached a cliff. When she looked down, she could see a town down below, glittering because of all the lights from the buildings, houses, street lamps and some metal contraptions on wheels that she did not know about. Making sure no one was nearby, as she did not know what was the norm in this new world, she decided to jump down the cliff. Once she had reached down, she walked towards the town itself. Soon, she was wandering the busy town streets. Luckily for her, the local population looked exactly like the people back in the elemental nations. Till now the only thing that seemed different were those metal contraptions which had people in it and the fashion style. Surprisingly, even the language was familiar. I always knew my luck was awesome, especially in these circumstances, but this is something next level, she silently laughed to herself. She continued walking aimlessly until her eyes landed on a food stall, which seems to be selling ramen. She decided to visit the place and proceeded to sit down on one of the stools before deciding to order. "One miso ramen please." The owner of the stall smiled at her and replied, "One miso ramen coming right up." Natsumi decided to start a small conversation with the stall owner in order to get some information. "My name is Natsumi, how are you doing today? I was just backpacking across the country when I reached this town. I am not sure where am I, can you tell me?" The stall owner just smiled while preparing her meal before answering her back. "Hi Natsumi, I am Takeshi and I am doing good, thanks for asking." He went on to strain the noodles once they were boiled before adding, "Backpacking, huh? I am not gonna lie, not many people do that. It must be exciting. As for your question, it seems this is the first time you have visited this town, seeing as you don't recognize it. In that case, let me welcome you properly." He proceeded to place the finished bowl of miso ramen in front of the blonde woman, the smile having never left his face, before he said, "Welcome to Kuoh, Natsumi. I'm Skip. 2 years 11 months. It has been almost 3 years since Natsumi jumped to this new world and landed just outside of this town called Kuoh. After entering Kuoh, the first thing Natsumi had deduced, having observed the local population for a few hours, was that they were normal, for lack of a better term, i.e., they didn't have chakra and they relied on some very high-end technology for a lot of basic needs. So, in order to blend in, she decided to seal off majority of her chakra for the time being using the same seal she had used for her yokai powers, leaving enough to use some of her basic techniques, as well as some her ocular powers. She wasn't naive enough to think that everyone in the world would be a normal human. Her being in that world was proof enough that anything could happen, and so, she had chosen to blend in order to avoid suspicion, at least till a time when she had enough information. She had abused her ability to create clones and disguise herself to learn more about the world she now found herself in. For the first 6 months, while she was trying to get the basic knowledge of the world, she used her ability to create things out of nothing using the yin-yang release that was granted to her by the Rinnegan. She didn't like this method of getting by as, to her, it felt like cheating. Also, since she was in a new place, she wanted to try and live in it as the other inhabitants, at least for the time she was here. She hadn't restricted herself to just one town though. She had traveled across the country in order to try and learn more about the world. Once she thought she had enough basic information, she decided to settle down for some time in Kuoh. Her reason of choosing this place had nothing to do with the ramen stand she had first visited when she came to this world. Having used some genjutsu, she was able to have her identification papers made. She decided to apply for a job at the local Kuoh Academy, which was a girls-only high school. She had applied for the job of the school nurse, having picked up some medical knowledge during her travels. Currently, the former Hokage was in the infirmary of Kuoh Academy. She was sitting at her desk filling out the day's report of her work. She was wearing a red turtleneck full-sleeves top along with a black knee-length pencil skirt. She had black stocking covering her long legs and black 3-inch heels, office shoes covered her feet. She had a white doctor's coat over her dress. Her thigh-length golden blonde hair was done up in a loose bun with 2 chest-length bangs left out to frame her face. She had some light red lipstick as the only cosmetic touch to her otherwise makeup-less but still godly beautiful face. Once done with the report, the blonde beauty got up from the chair and headed to the nearby window, gazing out of it, watching the last of the students, both male and female, now that they had been converted to co-ed, leave the campus after completing the day's club activities. She then looked up at the sky as the orange glow of the setting sun spread the last of its warmth for the day. I wonder what she is doing. She thought aloud, thinking about the first person who had managed to make a way in her heart in this new world. Looking back at the clock and seeing that it was 6 p.m. already, Natsumi proceeded to pack up and leave for the day as well. Submitting the reports on her way out at the administration office, she exited the campus. She had bought a small 2-bedroom house at a 15-minute walking distance from the school campus, so she could just walk to and from school. She stopped on her way at a convenience store to restock on her supplies. By the time she reached the front of her small house, it was already dark. It was a modest establishment having 2 en-suite bedrooms, a living dining room and a kitchen, all laid out in a single level. The house had a small garden in the back and was surrounded by a 6-foot wall with a black metal gate for entry. There was a nameplate beside the gate that read Uzumaki. Once she was inside, she took her shoes off at the entrance, put the shopping bags in the kitchen, and went straight to her bathroom. Turning on the hot water in the tub, she took off her coat and threw it in the laundry basket. She then unzipped the side of her skirt before lowering it down and taking it off completely and throwing it into the basket as well. She sat on the side of the tub and took off her stockings, revealing her red underwear and adding the stockings to the pile in the basket. She then stood up, grabbed the hem of her top and proceeded to take it off overhead, revealing her matching lacy red bra and also undoing her hair bun. The top went into the basket as well. Natsumi then redid her bun before taking off her bra, freeing her massive from their confines, throwing the said clothing into the basket as well. She then hooked her thumbs into the side of her panties, lowered them to her ankles before taking them completely off her body, throwing them into the basket as well. She then took a quick shower in the time the tub filled and then proceeded to take a soak in the hot water. While in the water, her thoughts again drifted back to that one person and the day she met her. 2 years 4 months ago, Kuoh Academy, Assembly Hall. Natsumi was currently standing along with the rest of the teachers at the left side of the hall in front of the stage overseeing the students as the headmaster addressed them from the stage. She was wearing a white shirt along with pastel blue pants with matching blazer over her shirt. She also had matching pair of medium-heeled office shoes. Her hair was done in a low ponytail and reached her thighs as a result. Her face-framing chest-length bangs were left as is, so were the few short bangs on her forehead. She only had applied a light red shade of lipstick for makeup. It was here that her eyes spotted something among the fresher's red hair, something that reminded her of her mother. It wasn't the exact same red or anything, but red hair in general was pretty rare, even back in elemental nations, even more so here. Unfortunately, in the sea of students, she couldn't really see who the young lady was. So, she decided to leave it and focus on the boring speech that was being given. It was later in the day when Natsumi was in the infirmary when she met the Redeed for the first time. She had helped one of the students in having gotten scrapped knees during PE. It was then she had gotten a good look at the Redeed. She was a beautiful young woman with white skin, blue eyes, like her own, and a buxom figure that almost matched her own. She was about 4 to 5 inches shorter than herself. Her most distinctive feature was her long, beautiful red hair that reaches down to her thighs, with a single hair strand sticking out from the top. Her hair also has loose bangs covering her forehead and side bangs framing her face. She was wearing the standard Kuoh Academy Girls' School PE uniform, which consisted of a red tracksuit top with white stripes down the sides and matching red knee-length shorts. Her hair was tied up in a high ponytail, as it was PE class that she was coming straight from. "Sensei, my friend here needs some first aid." Rias was the one to start the conversation, getting the attention of the blonde nurse. "Okay, help her to one of the beds here," Miss A responded Natsumi, not knowing the names of the students. "Rias Gremory, Uzumaki-sensei. And this here is Sayaka Miyoda," answered Rias with her and her companion's name as she proceeded to help her to the nearest bed and then sitting her down while she herself was standing on the side. "Right, and please call me Natsumi-sensei." "Gremory-san," Miyoda-san replied Natsumi, getting the first aid kit and small stool for herself to sit while she applied the first aid. "Hi, Natsumi-sensei," replied the two teens. Natsumi continued to clean the wounds before applying some antibiotic ointments on them and covering them up with cotton and medical tape. Just as she was getting up, the school bell rang signaling the end of the period and the start of another. "It should be fine now that we have applied first aid. You two should get going. It's time for the next," a blonde nurse said with a small smile. "Thank you Natsumi-sensei," replied the teens before proceeding to leave the room and back to the changing rooms in order to change and get to the next class, leaving Natsumi alone with her thoughts. "Rias Gremory," Hashi mused to herself, smile softly. It wasn't just her hair, but her eyes as well that reminded her of her mother. She did feel something off about her though. She had some kind of energy different than the normal people. Since it wasn't chakra, she couldn't get a feel for it. But she hadn't felt any negative emotions from the young lady, so she decided to let it be. In the changing room, Rias was in the middle of taking off her PE uniform and putting on the standard uniform. "I definitely felt something off. I can't put my finger on it, but she has some kind of energy in her that is different from the humans." Rias thought while the hands continued to pull up her magenta-colored school skirt to her waist, hiding her once visible pink lacy underwear before buttoning and zipping up from the side. She then proceeded to put on the white school shirt, buttoning it up from bottom to top, covering her matching lacy pink bra as she went past her, till all the buttons were done, all the while thinking it's not a lot, but definitely there. Though, she didn't seem dangerous. If anything, her energy feels warm and welcoming. She proceeded to tie the black ribbon around her neck before buttoning up the black corset around her waist that accentuated her further and then put on the black shoulder cape and then leaving the changing room with one last thought in her mind, maybe I should meet her again just to confirm. She wondered if that would be a good idea before making her mind about meeting the blonde nurse after the school. A few hours later in the infirmary, Natsumi was at her desk filling out her report about today's work as all staff members had been instructed to do when there was a knock at the door. "Yes, come on," and Natsumi replied, having an idea as to who it was, judging from the slightly higher than normal energy level she could feel. The door slid open, revealing it to be none other than Rias Gremory, as she had predicted. "Good evening, Natsumi-sensei. How was your day?" Rias greeted the blonde nurse as she entered the infirmary and proceeded to close the door behind her. "It was good. It was more boring than I thought, to be honest. Though, that is good, as a boring day for me means you guys are healthy and safe," replied back Natsumi with a warm smile before asking the same to the retired student. "How was your first day?" Gesturing her towards the seat in of her desk, signaling her to take it. "It was exciting. I got to meet some new people, make some new friends," Rias replied back with a smile while taking the seat, trying to get a better feel of the blonde nurse in front of her than she had gotten earlier, but failing. The only thing she could feel was a warm, welcoming feeling she had gotten earlier in the day. It was the same for Natsumi. She tried to get an assessment of the red-haired student in front of her, but she didn't learn anything new, not just by feeling her out. "That's good to hear," she smiled back. "So, what brings you here, Gremory-san?" Natsumi asked. Rias was surprised the blonde woman in front of her remembered her name, provided they had only met once. "Rias is fine, sensei, provided you don't mind." "As you wish, Rias-chan." "Still, what brings you here?" smiled back Natsumi. Rias was slightly taken aback with the affectionate suffix, but for some off reason, she didn't mind the blonde woman calling her that. If anything, it felt nice. "Nothing specific." She replied back, "I just wanted to come and greet you, hoping we could talk." Hearing that, Natsumi raised her left eyebrow as if asking her to elaborate. Rias understood the expression and did elaborate. "You see, when I came in here earlier, how do I put it?" She said the last part more to herself than to Natsumi before continuing, "I got this warm and welcoming feeling from you. So, I just wanted to befriend you." She ended in a question with a hopeful expression before adding, "kind of." In a way which looked cute to the blue eyes of the blonde woman in front of her. It seems she felt a little bit of chakra that is currently unlocked. Natsumi thought to herself, people have described my chakra as that before. Though, the thought of befriending the Redeed brought a soft smile to Natsumi's face. "Don't be so afraid, Rias-chan," she started. "It's not like I am gonna eat you alive if you want to befriend me," she joked. "To be honest, I am happy that you brought this up," Natsumi continued, still smiling softly. Her smile, being infectious, brought one to Ria's face as well. "I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but you kind of reminds me of my mother." Natsumi continued, her smile turning slightly sad at the mention of her mother. She had also had beautiful red hair, kind of like you, and similar blue eyes. Natsumi mentioned to the Redeed in front of her. Rias blushed slightly when Natsumi complimented her hair and eyes indirectly, but she immediately realized the use of past tense used by her, which prompted her to sadden a bit as well. "I am sorry," she didn't know what else she could say. "It's fine, you did nothing wrong, so there is no need to apologize. I have had enough time to make peace with it," she replied, trying to lift up her student spirits, which had been dampened a bit herself. "Anyways, what I wanted to say was that I was happy that you approached me, and I would be glad to be your friend," she finished. Rias was happy to hear that. "Thank you, sensei. I was really nervous," she chuckled. "I mean, it's not every day you ask your teacher to be your friend." Natsumi smiled at that. "It's fine. Everyone gets nervous about things they think they might fail at. It's natural. Though, that doesn't mean one shouldn't try." "Hi, sensei. I will remember that lesson." Rias smiled enthusiastically. Seeing her smile, something inside Natsumi melted and she ended up deciding to reveal something about herself to her first friend in this world. "Well, it's not like knowing something like this will expose me. Do you want to know a secret? One that only my husband knew of?" Natsumi asked the Redeed. "Husband?" Rias was visibly shocked at that piece of news. "You are married, sensei." "Well, not anymore," Natsumi started. "His name was Hiroto. He was kind and loving husband. Though I lost him and my 2 kids in an accident. Though it's been quite some time and I have made my peace with that as well." She decided to tell the truth mixed with some lies. And she had made peace with that. It had been around 50 years since Hiroto passed away and around 30 since Himawari. And they all had passed due to old age, so she wasn't sad about that, at least not anymore. She had also promised Hiroto as well as the tailed beasts that she will always try to live positively and she never goes back on her word. Rias was even more shocked by that because Natsumi not looked any older than 27 to 28, but she had been a mother in that time as well. Though, the fact that she had lost them saddened her as well. "I am sorry again," Rias apologized again sadly. "I seem to be bringing up sad memories again," and again she smiled sadly. Seeing her reaction, Natsumi tried to cheer her up again. For some reason, she didn't want to see the child in front of her sad because of her. "It's fine. You don't need to apologize. I brought them up this time, didn't I?" Rias didn't respond verbally this time, not sure how to respond. "Anyways, you want to know the secret or not?" Natsumi decided to change the subject to their original conversation. Rias just nodded this time, her sad smile disappearing and her eyes shining with curiousness, bringing a smile back to Natsumi's face as well. "Well, I told you how my mother had red hair, right? And since I hadn't inherited that trait, I always wanted it to resurface in my kids, hoping only I was the skip generation in between. Sadly, my son inherited my blonde hair and my daughter her father's indigo." Natsumi mentioned the secret and before the atmosphere plummeted again because of her mentioning her family, she decided to add, "So when I spotted red hair in the morning ceremony, I was secretly wanting to meet with the kid." "Oh," exclaimed a surprised Rias, not expecting something like this. "And guess what?" said Kid decided to show herself later wanting to befriend me. "So, I was really happy," Natsumi continued. "That made my day from boring to exciting as well." She smiled softly. "Well, I never thought there would be such a story behind Sensei," Rias replied smiling. "Nonetheless, I am happy that I was a special event in your day." Before either of them could say anything else, the school bell rang, signaling them that it was time to go home. "I guess that's it for today. We should head home now," said Natsumi getting up from her chair while arranging her report. And Rias started unsure of herself, but then remembered what Natsumi had said earlier, so she decided to ask anyway. "Can I come here again, sensei?" Natsumi stopped what she was doing and looked at Rias with a warm smile. "You are always welcome here, Rias-chan. Whenever you feel like talking to someone or if you have any problems, you are always welcome to talk. And I promise, I will try to help her come up with a solution." This got Rias to smile again. She too got up and proceeded to the door, sliding it open exiting, before turning one more time. "Thank you, sensei," she thanked the nurse getting a smile in return, before she slid the door shut and hopped her way back to class to get her stuff before exiting the school. Natsumi on her part packed her belongings and then went to the room's window, gazing out, where she got the view of the front yard of the school building and its entrance exit. She soon spotted Rias exiting the campus. She seemed cheerful which brought on a soft smile to her face. She didn't know why she had welcomed the girl like she did, but she didn't feel any negative emotions coming from her. "I guess, she resembling my mother, and the lack of negative emotions persuaded me to open up to her slightly," she mused. Once Rias was no longer visible, she went back to her desk, picked up her bag and report, and proceeded to exit the campus as well, dropping off her report on the way. With Rias was ecstatic that she had befriended the warm and beautiful blonde nurse. She wasn't planning to do that when she had decided to visit her after school hours. She just wanted to gauge the Natsumi-sensei out and decide if she was anyone dangerous or not and confront her accordingly. But as she got closer to the infirmary, the warm feeling that she was getting from her got stronger. Having felt the sense of security she got from her teacher, she decided to change her plans. She decided to trust in the gut feeling she was getting and ended up befriending the teacher. She was happy with her decision nonetheless. She decided to hurry home and tell her best friend and queen about what happened. Present time. Over the next couple of years, Rias continued to visit Natsumi in her office on a daily basis, mostly alone, sometimes with her best friend, Akeno Himahama. They talked for a couple of hours every day after school, till it was time to head back home. They had gotten closer through these talks. They talked about almost everything, discussed intimate problems with each other, all the while never mentioning the exact truth, just something close enough. They exchanged contact information as well, in order to keep in touch after school hours, over holiday periods and as such. They never even confronted each other about the energies they could feel in each other, and Natsumi could feel in Akeno as well, and the other members of the club that she formed an occult research club. But even with all the secrecy and mystery between them, they had come to know each other very well. They had gotten so close that Natsumi considered her as her own daughter, and Rias too considered Natsumi like a mother figure. It was on one of those days, a year or so ago, when Rias came to Natsumi's office, looking sad but trying to hide what she was feeling. About 1 year ago, Kuoh Academy, infirmary. After school hours, Natsumi was at her desk filing in the report for the day's work as usual when the door to the infirmary slid opened and in walked Rias Gremory. Natsumi looked up, having sensed distress and anger coming from the usual cheerful Redeed. "Good evening, Nat-sensei." Rias greeted her using the nickname for her she had come up with, trying to sound cheerful, but Natsumi had seen through her facade. She got up from her chair and went near her student, looking her in the eyes before asking, "What happened, Rias?" Natsumi decided to punch straight to the issue. She had gotten quite close to her. She even considered her like a daughter at this point, so she didn't like to see her in current state. Rias tried to reply nonchalantly, but was interrupted by the warm hand Natsumi placed on her right cheek, trying to ease her. "Don't try to hide it. Something happened. I know. I can tell," she said, leaving no room for lies. Having heard that and feeling the warm and loving hand on her cheek, Rias burst into tears as she proceeded to hug the person in front of her. She has gotten taller, Natsumi thought idly, before her attention went back to the trembling, crying teen, and she decided to return the embrace, stroking her back gently, trying to console the Redeed. Rias continued to cry for some more minutes, having melted into the embrace as well. Once the crying girl in her arms had calmed down a little, she guided her to one of the beds where she sat down, making Rias sit down beside her, still in her embrace. Once she had calmed down sufficiently, Natsumi decided to ask, "So, what has gotten my little Rias-chan all distressed and teary?" Without breaking the embrace, Rias replied, "Sniff, sniff, my parents told me a bit of news today. Apparently, I was betrothed to someone even before I was born." Natsumi was surprised, she didn't know that people still followed such age-old traditions. Even back in the elemental nations, such marriages had ceased to exist well before her time. "Oh, so that's what happened," Natsumi started. There was a hint of anger in voice, "and you don't want to marry the person they have selected?" Rias nodded in the embrace. "I have always wanted to fall in love and, sniff, then marry that person. Sniff, but my parents have taken that choice away from me, sniff. And if that was not enough, the guy they have selected has turned into a douchebag and a bastard." Natsumi could sense the anger in her being as well as hear it in her voice. She continued to stroke her back gently, trying to comfort her and calm her down further. "His name is Riser. I have met him a few times before, and every time he eyed me like a trophy that belongs to him. I was disgusted by his stares but never paid too much attention to it. But today, it was revealed to me that that bastard is supposed to be my fiancé, and I will marry that bastard by the time I graduate from this school." Rias continued. Natsumi's own anger was increasing as she listened to her story. "It seems these kinds of people are there in every world. Have you talked about it with your parents or your brother? That you don't want to marry such a guy?" asked Natsumi, trying to hide her anger. She was failing as well. "Yes. I said to them that I don't want to marry such a guy, but they were adamant about the marriage, saying that they had signed a contract and everything and they couldn't back out. So I don't get a choice in the matter," Rias replied. "Will you let me talk to your parents or your brother once? I might be able to make them see reason," asked Natsumi. She could have forced her way in their home and confronted them, but that might put Rias in a bind. No, Rias almost shouted, breaking the embrace, surprising the blonde nurse a bit before she got this determined look in her eyes, and she added, "You don't need to go that far, I will try again and again and again till they see that I won't be happy with such a bastard. I mean, I still have around 2 years before the scheduled date. I will try to get my family to see my perspective." A determination to solve her own problems. Seeing that in the Ritide's eyes, put Natsumi at ease as well, brought a small smile to her face. "Okay, do as you like. But promise me, you will tell me if they don't listen to you." "I will make them listen then," stated Natsumi, getting a smile from Rias as well. "Hi, sensei," she replied before deciding to get another hug from the blonde teacher, who happily returned it as well. "Come here tomorrow again, I have something to give to you," Natsumi said, earning another smile from the Ritide. "Sensei got me a gift?" she asked. "Yes, a gift from my favorite student," Natsumi replied back, prompting Rias to tighten the hug. They spent the remaining time like that, content with embrace. The next day, Natsumi used her Rinnegan's creation ability to create a small golden-colored wolf plush toy. She hid a seal inside with some of her chakra, which upon detecting strong distress or sadness or longness, will summon her to the person holding it. After school hours, when Rias came to the infirmary, Natsumi gave Rias the plush toy. "This is for you." Rias was ecstatic receiving the gift from her mother figure. She took the wolf and hugged it tightly. "Thank you, Nat-sensei. I will take great care of it and will always keep it with me," she smiled brightly. Seeing her smiling again after what had happened yesterday made Natsumi happy as well. "That's all I ask for," Natsumi smiled back and ruffled Ria's hair in a loving way, getting an even brighter smile from the Ritide. Present time. For the last year, Natsumi never got summoned to her, which relieved her, for the fact that meant she wasn't feeling any kind of distress or loneliness. She had also mentioned in their meetings several times how she hasn't been successful in gaining the favor of her family, but she will continue to try until she succeeds. She did mention to Natsumi yesterday how she was successful in getting to some kind of condition, which we would help her break off the engagement, and in preparation of the condition, she won't be able to contact her over the 10-day autumn break that starts tomorrow. She didn't even come to meet her today, and she hadn't received any texts or calls either. It did worry her to some extent, but she still remembers the sense of determination and hope she got from her when the Ritide had told her news. So she wanted to believe in her and as such, didn't ask much questions. The bathwater had started to cool off now, so the blonde beauty decided to get out on her bathrobe and went to the kitchen after having dried off her hair. Having put faith in her surrogate daughter's determination, she decided to let go off those thoughts and went on to prepare dinner. And even if she failed, she wouldn't let her get married to such a douchebag, even if it killed her. 10 days later, Underworld, Gremory Estate, she had failed. Even with 10 days of preparation, even with the power of boosted gear, even with her power of destruction, she failed. Rias was currently sitting in her room in a chair in front of a dressing mirror, crying to herself. Her maids had just dressed her in a white wedding gown that exposed her shoulders, and the top of her, it also had a big bow at the back of the dress just above her hips. A set of white elbow-length gloves, matching white medium-heeled white party shoes and a veil completed her look. Her long hair had been let down, and the red hair looked even more beautiful over the complete white dress. Normally, if it wouldn't have been forced on her, she would have really happy on her wedding day. But, as things stood, she couldn't be sadder. While sitting there, her eyes fell on the golden wolf plushie sitting on her table in front of her. This brought on fresh tears from her. She had promised her sensei that she would tell her if things went south. She was confident of her ability to defeat Rias and win back her freedom, and it was all going so well as well, but they couldn't see it through. She was afraid that she had let down and as such did not have the courage to call her. Her train of thought was interrupted when a maid knocked on her door. Rias wiped away her tears and ordered the maid to come in. "Everyone is waiting for you, Rias-sama," the maid announced. "I will be right out," she answered back. There is no point in mulling over these thoughts. "I am sorry, sensei, I have let you down. After even showing you how confident I was. And I am sorry for not having the courage to confront you," she thought, before she proceeded to exit her room. She did stop halfway through and went back to her table before picking up the wolf, hugging it like a 5-year-old kid would, and then proceeded to the male hall where the so-called party was being held. Unknown to her, her emotions were being channeled to the golden plushie she was holding. Once she reached the hall, she searched for her peerage. She spotted them in the opposite corner of the hall from her. Every member of her peerage was present, including her newest pawn and bishop, well, everyone except one. Each of them looked crestfallen, having failed to protect their king and friend from a devastating future. She started walking towards them. At least, she wanted to console them and free them from their guilt. On her way though, everyone started greeting and congratulating her on her marriage. On a marriage she didn't even want. Their greetings adding to her sorrow and grief. She hadn't really reached a halfway point to her friends when Rias decided to show up. Just seeing him almost brought her to tears. It also increased her emotions past the tipping point of the scale Natsumi had built into the plushie, triggering summoning mechanism built into it. Everyone was surprised when a cloud of smoke erupted at the place where Rias was standing. The smoke dissipated to reveal a buxom blonde woman with blue eyes that stood a couple of inches taller than Rias. She was wearing a pink dress and a black knee-length pencil skirt. Under the skirt, she had black stockings. She was wearing medium-heeled office shoes that matched her shirt and a doctor's coat over her entire attire with the front open. She had let her golden blonde hair fall freely over her back and it reached her thighs. She also had 2 chest-length bangs of hair framing her face, as well as some smaller bangs covering parts of her forehead. The blonde woman blinked a couple of times, scanning her surroundings, trying to understand where she was. "That sensei." Ria's voice brought her attention to the Redeed who was standing to her right. Natsumi turned towards the voice, her eyes landing on Rias in the wedding dress, who was staring back at her. Her face showed a variety of emotions, surprise, happiness, sadness as well some slight fear. "So, you couldn't get out, huh?" Natsumi asked, though it was a rhetorical question. Rias didn't respond. Instead she just turned her eyes away while grabbing her left arm with her right. She didn't have the courage to look her sensei in the eyes. Natsumi, on her part, felt sad that her daughter-like student couldn't meet her eyes. She put her hand on top of Ria's head and said with a small smile, "My stupid student. Haven't I taught this to you already? It is okay to ask for help if things go out of your control." Rias turned her eyes towards Natsumi and met with her warm ones. She couldn't stop herself anymore and hugged her with everything she had, trying everything to stop her tears. She couldn't stop herself from trembling though. This caused another round of surprised gasps from the onlookers. Natsumi returned her embrace, stroking her back, trying to calm and console her. "It's gonna be fine now, Rias. I promise you," she said into her ear. Rias didn't know why, but it caused her to calm down a bit. She may not be a devil or as strong as the rest of the people in the hall, but she still managed to provide her a sense of security. "Guard," shouted Riser, who took his sweet time overcoming the surprise he just felt from the sudden appearance of the visitor. Natsumi glimpsed at the guy who had shouted. For some reason, she knew this was the Riser guy Rias had told her about. He was a tall and handsome young man in his early 20s with short blonde hair and dark blue eyes. He was wearing a red 3-piece suit. Before the guards though, 2 red-haired men and a brown-haired woman made their way over to them, having seen the outburst. The elder of the 2 Redeeds was a middle-aged, handsome-looking man with long crimson red hair that was tied in a loose ponytail with a black hairband. He had bright blue eyes just like Rias. He also has a short and red stubble for a beard. He was wearing a white business suit. The other Redeed was a handsome man who looked to be in his early 20s. He had shoulder-length crimson red hair and blue eyes just like Rias as well. He was wearing a black 3-piece suit. The lady who looked a lot like Rias had shorter flaxen hair and violet eyes. She looked around the same age as the younger-looking of the 2 male Redeeds. "What is going on here?" the elder Redeed asked, seeing his daughter hugging an unknown but beautiful blonde woman. Rias decided to break the embrace having heard her father's voice and decided to introduce her sensei to them before the situation escalated any further. "This is Natsumi sensei, Otu-sama," she said, gesturing towards the blonde woman who was still standing close to her. "She is our school nurse. I summoned her here as she is my friend." She lied about the last part, not wanting Natsumi to get in trouble because of her. "Sensei, this is my father, Zeoticus Gremory," she added, gesturing to the elder Redeed. "This is my big brother Serzichus Gremory," she continued, gesturing to the younger of the male Redeeds. "And this is my mother, Venelana Gremory," she gestured to the flaxen-haired lady. "So this is the family of my student, who had her best interest at heart," greeted Natsumi with a voice that clearly conveyed her sarcasm, which wasn't lost on anyone listening. Before the Gremorys could say anything, Riser was the one to reply in a haughty tone, "Show some respect, woman. You are standing in front of one of the most influential devil families in the underworld, as well as the leader of our faction." He gestured toward Serzichus at the last part. Natsumi looked at Rias at that revelation, who had decided to keep her head down, feeling down that she had kept her in the dark for so long. Natsumi patted her head in an affectionate way. "So, you were a devil, huh?" She said more to herself than to anyone else. "Don't worry, Rias. I am not mad at you, we all have our secrets. I won't abandon you just for you being a devil," she added, getting to Rias to look up and give a small smile. She turned her attention back to the Gremorys though. "I don't care whatever species you guys are. And I also don't care for your reasons for doing this. I just want you guys to understand your daughter and sister better." She put a hand around Ria's shoulder and brought her closer to her a bit as she said that. "Now, just tell me, how can we call off this engagement?" Her question was to Ria's family. Hold on. Do you even know what you are doing? This engagement is important and necessary for the future of devils. It's not something a human harlot like you can butt into," Riser exclaimed from the side. Rias was furious that he had called her sensei that, which was evident from her expression, but Natsumi chose to ignore that and replied before Rias could, "Do I look like I care?" she asked Riser rhetorically before focusing on the Gremorys again and asking her earlier question again. "So? How can we call it off? It was Surziches that replied, there is one way. This brought on a wave of surprise from everyone present. Rias decided to speak up, but Lucifer-sama, I have already won her. His words angered Natsumi to such an extent that she wanted to backslap the guy, but she decided to control herself. For Rias, she said to herself. Rias, unable to read the change in atmosphere, didn't we pay attention, and continued, I beat her in the rating game, didn't I? Well, yes you did. But calling it a fair game is a bit much. It was her first game after all, Surziches replied. Natsumi was bewildered. They put Ria's future on the line at a game. It doesn't matter what kind of game it was still ridiculous. You bet Ria's future at a game? Natsumi asked in a furious tone. Well, we call it a game, but it is more of a fight. Surziches tried to explain, but to no avail. Natsumi's anger hadn't gone down. She, nonetheless, took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. Let's first get her out of engagement and worry about their methods later. Never mind your stupid ways, tell me how to call off the engagement, she demanded from the Satan. I would say, if someone whom she has acknowledged fights and defeats Rias here, Surziches started gesturing to the blonde man, then we can call off the engagement. Do you think it is fair? Lord and Lady Phoenix. If he has defeated her and her representative before, he can do it again, right? He asked, turning around and asking a blonde-haired couple. The male of the two looked like a slightly older version of Rias, while the female also had blonde hair and blue eyes and a figure slightly less voluptuous than her own. It was the male who responded, I guess it is fair. If he has done it once, he should be able to do it again, the female only nodding at his words. What do you say, Rias? Surziches turned to ask the man in question. I beat her and her peerage once, I can do it again. And this time, I even have an audience, so that no one would dispute the result, he said arrogantly. Rias, is it fine with you? Surziches turned to her sister. It was Natsumi who responded, though, she accepts. Even though I don't like this way of doing things. So, who is gonna be my opponent? Asked Rias, feeling confident about his chances. Before Natsumi or Rias could say something. I will fight you, came a voice from the crowd, who then parted to reveal a brown-haired teen of average height with short spiky brown hair, with 2 short locks of hair behind his head and light brown eyes. His left arm resembled to that of a dragon. He was wearing a black and white tux. Natsumi recognized the boy as one of Kuoh Academy's resident perverts, Issei. Apart from Rias, he was the one who spent most time in the infirmary, though they had widely different reasons. While Rias came to visit Natsumi to spend time with a blonde nurse, the brown-haired boy was there as a consequence of his perverseness. He even had the guts to ogle her, though it only took a couple of bitch slaps to stop him from doing that. Behind Issei was the rest of Ria's peerage. The first person she recognized was Akeno Himejima, Ria's best friend. She was a beautiful young woman with a voluptuous figure, very long black hair and violet eyes. Her hair was tied in a long ponytail, reaching all the way down to her legs, with 2 strands sticking out from the top and sloping backward, with an orange ribbon keeping it in place. She was wearing an orange gown that showed off her figure very well. She had met the girl a few times before. She was a good girl overall and seemed like a good friend to Rias. The second boy Natsumi recognized was Yudo Kiba. He was a handsome young man with short blonde hair, bluish-gray eyes and a mole underneath his left eye. He was wearing the same tux as Issei. She had only seen him from afar a few times. Always surrounded by girls, the popular type. She recognized the second girl of the group as Kaneko Toju. She was a short petite girl with white hair and gold eyes. The front of her hair had 2 long bangs going past her shoulders and several loose bangs hanging over her forehead, while the back has a short bob cut. She was wearing a black cat-shaped hair clip on both sides of her hair. She was a gown similar to Akeno's. Natsumi didn't know much about this one. She was a fresher, so she hadn't had time to form an opinion yet. The last member was a new student named Asia Argento. She was a pretty young girl with long blonde hair and green eyes. Her hair flowed all the way down to her back, with split bangs over her forehead and a single strand sticking out from the top and sloping backward. She was also wearing a gown similar to Akeno's and Kaneko's. She was even newer than Kaneko. Though, from what little Natsumi had seen of her, she seemed the innocent type. After declaring his contention, Issei with the rest of the peerage decided to join at Ria's side. Rias was touched at the gesture, but she was also fearful that the result would be the same as the rating game. So she intervened. No, she ordered them, you won't be fighting anymore. It is my marriage, so I will fight him myself, she insisted. There was resistance from her peerage, but one look from her stopped them from speaking further. They could see the determination in her eyes, so they decided to support her instead. Rias Natsumi was proud of her student for taking responsibility for herself, but she had already gotten enough info to know that she had failed once, the outcome wouldn't change just in such a short time, you won't be fighting him, she said. Rias looked at her sensei with wide eyes, but I can't, she started but was interjected. No buts. From what I have gathered from the last 5 minutes, you weren't able to defeat him, Natsumi said, which caused Rias to lower her head in shame. Don't take this the wrong way, Rias-chan. I am not disappointed. In fact, I am proud that you want to take your matters in your own hand, she continued, seeing her retired student looking down, trying to increase her self-confidence. This seemed to have worked as it caused Rias to look into her eyes with a surprised but happy look. It's just that the outcome is less likely to have changed in such a short time, isn't it? She added. Rias just nodded slowly, already knowing this fact to some extent. But then who will be fighting, she asked with slight worry in her voice, having a slight idea as what the blonde teacher might be thinking. Isn't it obvious? It would be me. Who else could it be? Natsumi asked as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Well, to her it was. But to the rest of the gathered population, it was preposterous. They didn't know what Natsumi was capable of. No, Rias rejected with all her might, I can't let you get hurt or worse yet killed for my sake. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if something were to happen to you. Rias knew her sensei was far from weak for a human, but as far as she knew, Natsumi sensei was no devil. This brought on some surprised look from her family as well as her peerage. They didn't know she was close enough with someone to have said that. Natsumi grabbed Rias by her shoulders before looking her in the eyes and said, it's gonna be fine. I know some martial arts. I will be able to handle myself. She then proceeded to lean towards her and whispered in her, I said everyone has their secrets, my little Rias-chan. Didn't I? Have some faith in me, would you? Making Rias widen her eyes at the implications of her words. She then backed off, letting go of her and smiling at her warmly, prompting a nod of confidence from Rias. Natsumi then turned towards Surziches and Riser, so, we have the combatants ready. When is gonna be the fight? She asked. Are you sure you want to do this? Asked Surziches just to be sure. He could sense some aura from the blonde nurse, but it was really small and didn't amount to much. Though her confidence was saying a completely different story. Yes, I am sure, she confirmed. She seems really confident for someone who doesn't seem more than a slightly above average human. Let's see how this goes. The fight will reveal her true self, Surziches thought to himself. Riser, feeling his chances shot up, decided to add an extra condition since this is a rematch. How about we up the stakes a bit? You win, Rias goes free. I win, I get you along with Rias, he said, pointing towards Natsumi. This angered Rias, and she was about to go and hit him with her power of destruction, but Natsumi put her hand in front of her, stopping her. I don't mind. As long as my cute little student goes free, she said, getting a blush from Rias for being called cute. Natsumi then turned to Surziches again, so, I ask again. When? I am ready whenever you guys are, she asked him again. In that case, we should get this over with as quickly as possible, he said with a smirk. Graphia, prepare a pocket dimension for the fight, he called a bit loudly, signaling his wife to prepare equals an arena. Natsumi turned to Rias, leaned over her and whispered with a warm smile, everything will soon be all fine, my little Rias-chan, before she proceeded to plant a kiss on her forehead. That earned her wide eyes from almost everyone present, but a warm smile from Rias. Natsumi only cared about that smile. Be careful, sensei, he has very high regeneration, warned Akeno from behind Rias. Natsumi acknowledged the information with a nod, you guys did everything to protect Rias. You have my gratitude, she added, looking at Rias' peerage. There is no need for that, sensei, it was Issei who spoke up, we would have done it anyways, since Rias is our precious friend. Also, we failed anyways, so it didn't matter, he added the last part bitterly. It's the thought and effort that counts, Issei-kun replied Natsumi with a smile. Okay, everything is in place, announced Surziches. Right. Just a few more minutes, Rias. Wait for my return, Natsumi smiled at her student, who she considers as her daughter. Hi, sensei, smiled back Rias. Good luck, sensei, her peerage wished in unison. It's not like I need it, but thanks nonetheless, replied Natsumi before she proceeded to go with Surziches, who had her teleported to the arena. Do you think she will be able to do it? She is only human, asked Akeno to her king. I believe in her, Akeno. I believe in her, replied Rias before she, along with the peerage, looked towards a giant magic display that showed Natsumi and Riser some distance apart from each other in the prepared arena. Inside the pocket dimension, Natsumi looked around the arena she was teleported to. It was built like a colosseum with a giant tower at the side. The more interesting bit for her was the red sky. She then looked at Riser, who had a change in his attire. He was now wearing a white pants and a white and red corset that had multiple tail-like protrusions coming out of its back. He had left his chest bare, but his hat were covered by black tights from shoulder to wrist. Natsumi decided to taunt the blonde devil, so? Are you gonna just stand there? I thought you were someone who liked to take charge. She extended one of her hands forward in a come-get-me gesture with a smirk on her face, while adding, you will have to come and get me if you want Rias or me for yourself. Seeing the taunting gesture, Riser couldn't contain himself and sprouted wings made of fire off his back before launching himself at the blonde nurse. Natsumi didn't react though, she just stood her ground patiently waiting for the devil to reach her. Just as he neared her, he cocked his right fist back before throwing it outwards, aiming to land the punch on the blonde woman's face and knocking her out with the blow. But, before the blow connected, Natsumi channeled some chakra into her eyes, transforming them into her Mangekyo Sharingan, before muttering to herself, Kamui. Riser's eyes widened when he noticed the change in his opponent's eyes, but the next thing that happened flabbergasted him. He flew through her as if she wasn't even there. Just as he had passed her completely, Natsumi had turned around, having turned off the technique, before she proceeded to grab one of the ankles of the airborne devil and tug on it slightly, resulting the blonde male to comically fall face first into the ground. In the Gremory Estate, Male Hall. Everyone who was watching the exchange had their eyes widened to size of saucers, having seen something no one was expecting from the blonde human. Did he just pass through her? Issei asked incredulously, just wanting to confirm he wasn't hallucinating. Akeno, who was standing beside him, could only nod dumbly, not expecting something like this. Rias was just staring silently at the screen. She had noticed the change in her sensei's eyes. They were now red with a black six-pronged shuriken pattern at the center of it. She had a lot of questions for her sensei after this. Though, she knew she most likely had a lot of explaining to do as well. Back in the pocket dimension, having recovered from the fall, Riser got up and turned around to face her while putting some distance between them. Though he didn't show any visible damage, he had become slightly cautious of his fellow blonde. He had never seen something like this before after all. Before he had time to gather his thoughts and attack again, Natsumi decided to take the initiative this time around. She channeled some chakra into her eyes again, this time focusing her vision on her opponent's right arm before muttering again, Kamui. This time a small rift opened near Riser's right arm, sucking his arm into itself. Riser was struggling to get his arm out, but before he had any chance, Natsumi cut off the chakra flow, collapsing the rift which closed and took his right arm with it. "Ah!" screamed Riser in pain, before taking a couple deep breaths as he focused his energy into regenerating his arm. Seeing his regeneration, Natsumi whistled slightly, seems like Akeno was right. "I will have to use more power if I want to end this quickly." Having said this, she raised her right hand forward, her open palm facing downwards. She then proceeded to channel chakra into the back of her hand. This resulted in the seal she had on it to become visible. The seal currently showed the number 11. Seijin Shiru. Level 11. Release, she muttered, disengaging the 11th level of her power seal she had applied to seal of her chakra after coming to this dimension. The seal on her hand glowed for some time, and the number on the back of her hand changed from 11 to 10, showing that only 10 levels of restrictions were in place. This resulted in Natsumi's chakra to skyrocket, increasing pressure on her opponent due to the sheer amount and density of the energy. She had also let out some killing intent against anyone who had tried to force her student. Riser's body involuntarily started trembling as a result of the pressure he was now experiencing from his opponent, making him sweat bullets. Gremory Estate, Main Hall. The amount of energy Natsumi was now letting out could be felt even in the main hall. Everyone including Rias were shocked at the amount of power that was being released. "Rias, did you know about this?" Ria's brother asked her, bewildered at the amount of energy being released. "She is definitely not human. What is she then? Is she a friend or a foe?" he thought to himself. Rias shook her head in the negative. "I wouldn't be so afraid letting her fight in the start if I knew," she responded truthfully. Everyone in the hall except Rias and her peerage felt a lot of the killing intent, even though the one releasing it was in another dimension. They were sweating as well from the intent and had slight labored breathing. Only the few ultimate class devils and above like Surziches and his wife Grafia were unaffected by it. Rias and her peerage, on the other hand, were feeling warmth from the energy that Natsumi was unleashing. The warmth brought on a smile to Ria's face, having brought a sense of familiarity with it. Even Kaneko had let her guard down, unleashing her cat ears and tail. "She has very warm chakra," she almost purred. This shocked the peerage even more, having the only ones having heard this tidbit. Their sensei was a chakra user, even though she mostly seemed human and not a yokai. Rias ignored it though, and continued to look into the magic screen with a smile on her face. In the pocket dimension arena, having released her first limiter, Natsumi went to curtail her energy, getting it into control again. From the look that Riser was giving off, her plan to intimidate him seemed to have worked. "So, are you going to give up now or not? You should know that you won't be able to beat me," she said. Riser on his part didn't seem to have learned when to back off. "Are you kidding me? I have unlimited regeneration of the Phoenix. You won't be able to finish me off," she boasted. Natsumi on her part didn't respond. "I don't want to kill the kid. Well, I guess I have no choice but to rough him up," she thought to herself. She raised her left hand up in the air and started gathering energy into it. A blue ball of chakra spinning in multiple directions, the size of a basketball, appeared in her hands. She continued to add chakra to the ball, increasing its size till it was a bit wider than she was tall. Riser prepared to defend himself against the attack, but before he could do anything, Natsumi vanished from in front of him in a burst of raw speed and appeared at his right side and went on to smash the blue chakra ball into side. Adama Rasengan. Natsumi exclaimed the name of the technique. The giant Rasengan shred into Riser's side, eliciting a scream from him. Natsumi didn't stop though, she continued to grind the chakra ball into him till she had shredded in his complete right arm along with half his torso and face. Once content with the result, she let the technique die, blasting the half-shredded boy into the distance. Though Natsumi knew it wouldn't be enough to make him back down, and as such she waited for him to get back on his feet. Riser grunted while trying to stand up. His body had started regenerating, but it still hurt like hell. Once on his feet, his body still regenerating, "I am gonna make you pay, bitch," she shouted in anger, which soon turned to despair, and his face lost all color when he saw Natsumi smirk and put her hands in a cross sign and call out, "Teju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." What happened next not only shocked and scared Riser, it also sent a wave of shock in the occupants of the main hall back in the Gremory estate. Half of the arena was filled with smoke, which soon cleared to reveal around 50 copies of the blonde, all staring back at him with a smirk on their faces. Each of the clones raised their left hands in the air, channeling their energy into the same technique that Riser was still recovering from. Before the clones could charge him though, he raised his now healed arms into the air. "I give up," he said in a desperate attempt to avoid getting killed. Natsumi smirked in victory, "Now that's a good boy," before dispelling the mini-clone army and deactivating her Sharingan. Riser Phoenix has forfeited the match. The winner is Natsumi, a robotic voice called out, and both Riser and Natsumi were teleported back to the Gremory Estate's main hall. Gremory Estate, main hall. Rias was ecstatic. She had tears of joy in her eyes. She was free. She was finally free. She turned around towards the teleportation device, and as soon as Natsumi came back, she tackled her mother figure in a hug, thanking her and crying out of joy on her chest. Natsumi on her part returned the hug, her eyes wet from the happiness she could from the redeed, someone she considered like her own daughter. She stroked the redeed teen's back with her left hand, while her right patted the back of her head gently. "No need to thank me, Rias. I only did what my daughter wanted after all," Natsumi whispered to the redeed, surprising her slightly. It was the first time she had acknowledged it directly, even if both of them knew what the other thought of them as. Ria's flow of tears increased slightly, and she was having difficulty speaking because of her emotions, but she replied nonetheless, "Still, thank you, Ka-chan," causing Natsumi to hug her tighter, having heard her title. The loving moment between the pair didn't last too long and was soon disrupted by the footsteps of several people coming their way. Natsumi just looked up, noticing it was Ria's family and her peerage that had approached them. She just nodded at them in acknowledgement, never breaking her embrace with her surrogate daughter. "That was so cool, sensei." It was Issei who spoke up first with stars for eyes. "First, he just phased right through you, and then that huge ball of energy, and in the clone thing." He continued counting through the displays she had put on, getting a chuckle from the blonde-haired woman. He was interrupted by Kaneko though. "You use chakra," she stated simply with only a slight hint of curiousness in her voice. "It was so warm," she added. It was the second part that brought a small smile to Natsumi's face. It was also that part that raised the eyebrows of the Gremory family. "Warm?" asked Zeoticus. "I didn't get that kind of feeling." "Did you guys?" he asked his wife, son, daughter-in-law and the rest of the peerage. "Yes," chorused Ria's peerage together. "No," came the answers from the Gremory family, except Ria's, at the same time. At this difference in opinion, everyone looked at the only person who could answer. Natsumi just sighed. "People have described my energy before as being warm. I guess that's what these guys felt," she answered, truthfully nodding towards her surrogate daughter's peerage. "You guys, on the other hand, might have felt some of the killing intent I had unleashed against anyone who was even slightly responsible for Ria's predicament, and considering from what you just mentioned, as well as the nervous glances from your guests," she continued, just glancing around the reception hall, "I am guessing the killing intent as well as some brunt of my power was felt all the way here, across the dimension. Must be because of the small opening you guys had in order to observe the fight," she concluded, getting a nod of confirmation from Surziches. "You are right on that regard. Though, I am curious, and I believe it's not just me, but all that power that had even the high-class devils sweating from the pressure, even though I am pretty sure only a small amount actually made it out of that dimension," stated Surziches, impressed as well as equally wary of the being in front of him, "and your use of chakra. Are you really just a human? Or perhaps a yokai?" he asked the blonde nurse. That's the first I have heard of that term, so I am not really sure what they are." She lied through her teeth before adding, "But what I am," she started getting everyone's attention, "is none of your business." She completed with slight narrowing of her eyes. "Anyways, I believe, you guys," she changed the subject masterfully, looking towards the Gremory family, "owe someone an apology," she finished, gently breaking off her embrace with the redeed in her arms and getting her to face her family members. Rias, on her part, was just listening to them talk till her surrogate mother turned her towards her family. She had stopped crying a few moments back, but she still had some stray tears in her eyes. She wiped away those tears before looking up at her family with an expression which clearly stated how hurt she was with what they did. Though, she didn't say anything or made a move. She just stood there by Natsumi's side, holding the golden wolf plushie close to her chest with both hands. Seeing her hurt expression brought some sense into her family finally. "I am sorry, Rias." It was Venelana who spoke this time, her eyes clearly stating how ashamed she was of herself. "We shouldn't have done what we did. We should have listened to what you wanted. I hope you can forgive us. We will make sure something like this will never happen in the future." Zeodicus added on to his wife's apology, getting a nod from her. Natsumi just nudged Rias forward towards her mother, getting Rias to embrace the flaxen-haired beauty. Then Alana returned the hug. "I am so sorry, my daughter," she whispered into the Retide's ears, trying really hard to hold back her tears, but failing ever so slightly. "It's okay," Akasama Rias replied, equally in tears. "It's all in the past now," she added as her father who joined both of them in a family moment, embracing both of them gently. Natsumi and her students all had smiles on their faces seeing the trio. The blonde nurse, though, turned her attention towards the other male Retide in their proximity and his supposed wife, who was wearing a maid uniform for some odd reason. She decided to not ponder on it. It wasn't her place to comment on how others decide to live their life, especially when she had nothing to do with them. It was the first time she had a good look at the silver-haired maid though. She was a beautiful young woman appearing to be in her early 20s with back-length silver hair that featured a long braid on each side with small blue bows at the ends, while the rest was let down and ended in twin braids. She had red eyes. She was wearing a blue and white French maid outfit with long sleeves and a white maid headband over her head with red lipstick as a cosmetic accessory. "Aren't you two gonna apologize?" Natsumi asked the couple, getting everyone's attention. Having broken off the embrace, the older Grimmery couple as well as Rias were looking in their direction. "We were about to, but didn't want to interrupt the lovely moment." Surziches started. "I am really sorry as well, Rias. As your older brother, I should have done more to help you, which I didn't. I hope you forgive me as well," he added, opening his arms wide, hoping for the younger Retide to give him a hug as well. Rias on her part just smiled from her position, but didn't move an inch. "It's okay, Ani-sama. I understand that being the Mayu, you cannot really show direct favoritism." Seeing her not move resulted the said Mayu to deflate slightly, getting sweat drops from some and snickers from others, mainly Natsumi, Rias and uncharacteristically Grafia. Grafia just patted the deflated Mayu on his back before apologizing as well. "I am sorry as well, Rias. Even though I was against the marriage, I couldn't do to help you out much." "It's fine, Wani-sama. Everything turned out to be alright. And I know you must have tried your best as well," Rias replied with a smile on her face. "Rias-chan," Natsumi called out, gaining the Retide's attention. "Can you give us adults here a few moments, dear?" she asked with a small smile. "Why don't you show your peerage around the castle?" added Venelana. Rias hesitated a bit but nodded, wondering what she wanted to talk about to her family. She took her peerage members to explore the castle. Natsumi just saw her surrogate daughter leave with a smile till she was out of sight, before turning towards the Grimmery family. "See, I know you guys are wary of me, rightly so. It's not every day that someone like me just appears out of nowhere and display the amount of power that I did." She started getting slight but serious nods from everyone. "But, my daughter seems to have extreme trust in you," Venelana argued her point, "so, I am gonna put mine in you as well." This surprised Natsumi for a moment, but she got over it quickly before she continued with a fond smile. "Thank you for that. I actually love Rias, as if she were my own daughter. And I would do anything to make her happy." Before anyone could say something to that, she added, "That's not what I want to discuss though. I do remember Rias mentioning to me that she lived alone most of the time. Her family, you guys, were in a different place." The Grimmery family just nodding in agreement. It was technically correct. Though, they were wondering where this was going. "I have been wondering for quite some time that." Natsumi started carefully. "I should ask her to move in with me while she was living in Kuoh." This got Rias' family surprised. They weren't expecting this kind of thing. They weren't exactly opposed to the idea though. Living with someone was always better than living alone. But, before any of them could say anything, Natsumi decided to add extra thoughts. "I could have asked her directly. I mean, I will later on. I just wanted to pass this by you guys first. I wouldn't have done so had you not apologized to her or something worse happened. But considering she forgave you all, I don't want you to be in the dark related to this matter." She didn't mince her words, but it was true. Had Rias been married off before Natsumi herself could intervene, or her family had decided to keep their ego and not apologize, she wouldn't have cared and just took Rias away. That was not the case anymore though. Before Surziches or Zeodicus could say anything though, it was Venelana who answered first. "We understand where you are coming from. And being honest, I would love for Rias to live with someone who loves her as much as you do. It is obviously better than living than alone. I am glad you think that way. I will leave you guys to entertain your guests then. I will go and find Rias and ask her what she thinks, smiled back Natsumi and took off, leaving behind a smiling Venelana and still slightly surprised Surziches and Zeoticus, who were still wondering what just happened. Rafia, on her part, was just keeping her neutral facade, but if one were to look closely, they could see a hint of a smile on her lips. A few minutes later. With Rias and her peerage. Somewhere in the halls of the Gremory estate, Rias was showing the castle to the new members of her peerage Issei and Asia, with Yudo, Akeno and Kaneko already having seen it before. She was leading from the front as they wandered the halls, her peerage just following her. How do you think Sensei got so strong? Do you think she is a Yokai? Akeno asked her king out of the blue. I don't know, Akeno replied Rias truthfully, to be honest, I never asked her. So, I guess she just never went out of her way to reveal the truth. Well, provided I never revealed who I was, I would say that's fair on her part. She then turned around looking her queen in the eyes, but I trust her completely. And not just because she won me my freedom, which I couldn't do by myself, even with your help, she added, a bit furious at herself for being weak. I trusted her even before that. I am sure she has her reasons, like I had mine, and I know for sure that she will let me know the truth when she is ready. Akeno could see the trust and confidence in her king's eyes when she said that, so she didn't argue back, just nodding in acceptance. By the way, but you. Why are you holding that wolf plushie? It was Yudo who asked this time, pointing to the soft toy that Rias was carrying around. Oh, this. Rias started looking down at the toy. Nat-sensei gave this to me about a year back as a gift. I was just feeling down, so I was just carrying it around, imagining she was with me. And guess what, she was next to me a few minutes later, she added, a look of realization dawned on her. By the look on your face, I guess, you are thinking of the same thing as then? Asked Akeno. With all the commotion that ensued, it slipped my mind for a bit, but how did she get here in the first place? Rias asked out loud what everyone in her peerage was thinking, looking up at the ceiling in wonder. Oh, I just placed a summoning seal in that toy, a voice answered, getting the group's attention. Rias could see Natsumi coming their way from the same way they had come earlier. She had a big smile on her face, bringing a similar way on to Rias. I finally found you guys. I didn't know anyone at the party, so I decided to ditch it and look for you. Natsumi continued, reaching the group. I hope you guys don't mind. She asked. We definitely don't, Rias answered immediately, getting nods from the others. You mentioned some kind of summoning seal. Asked Yudo, wanting the blonde-haired nurse to elaborate on her earlier comment. Oh, nothing major. I placed a seal inside of that plushie before I gave it to Rias. Natsumi continued her explanation. It was designed so that whenever the holder, Rias, would feel overwhelming loneliness or despair or sadness, I would be summoned to her side immediately. I think it was during that party earlier that the threshold reached in Voila. I was there. This got some surprised looks from the teenage group. That's some high-level magic there, Sensei Akeno commented on what everyone was thinking. It wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't magic though, Natsumi corrected, you can call it a technique. It was still impressive, Akeno relied back, so, if you don't mind us asking, what faction are you from, Sensei? You use chakra, but you seem slightly different from a Yokai, she asked. Well, I will give you the same answer as I gave to Ria's family. What I am is none of your business. You have my thanks for helping Rias, but you haven't earned the right yet, Natsumi started. I will tell Rias once we are alone. You guys will probably know after some time passes. That time isn't now though, she finished. Before anyone could argue back, Natsumi moved forward through the group, standing in front of a smiling Rias, and continued, I have to talk to you about in private. Rias, nodding in understanding, looked past the blonde woman and addressed her peerage. Can you guys go back to the main hall? I will be there shortly. Her voice left no room for an argument, so the peerage just nodded and left the two, treading towards the hall. Let's go to my room, Rias said, grabbing one of Natsumi's hand and leading her to her bedroom. Natsumi just followed her surrogate daughter with a smile. They soon reached her bedroom, where Rias ushered Natsumi in ahead and proceeded to close the door behind her, giving them some privacy. Natsumi looked around the room and whistled slightly. It was a huge room, easily equal to the size of her whole house. There was a king-size bed at one end, a dressing table to the adjacent one on the right. There was even a couple of couches with a table in between in order to greet guests. The whole room was decorated with the finest wares that Natsumi had ever seen. Natsumi turned around and addressed Rias, who was now looking down, slightly nervous from what the conversation was gonna entail. It's a nice room you have got here, Rias-chan, Natsumi started. It's now making me nervous about what I am to say. Rias looked up at her surrogate mother, a bit surprised and curious. She wasn't expecting the blonde woman to be nervous in this. How should I say this? Natsumi pondered aloud to herself before deciding to just get to the point, nodding to herself. I have already talked regarding this with your family, they don't seem to mind. It's no pressure or anything, but if you would you like to live with me while you stay in that other dimension? Out of all the things Rias was expecting, this wasn't it. It took her some time to comprehend what was just asked. She just stood there with a blank look on her face for a few moments before the biggest smile Natsumi had ever seen on the Redeed broke out on her face. The Redeed tackled the blonde mother figure into another hug, resting her face on her shoulder blades before simply replying, "I would love to, Koh-chan." Natsumi was ecstatic at the reply, returning the embrace happily. "Just so you know, my place isn't as grand as she just wanted to lay it out before the move actually happened. It doesn't matter. As long as you are there, I don't need anything else there," Rias replied truthfully. "Great. We can move you in as soon as we get back to Kuoh," Natsumi stated, getting just a nod from the Redeed. Rias broke the hug this time. "Let go celebrate then, Koh-chan," she said, grabbing the blonde woman by her hand and dragging her back to the party, getting a slight chuckle from said blonde. The next day. Evening. At Natsumi's residence. It took Natsumi and Rias all day to move the Redeed stuff from her previous apartment to Natsumi's house and then set up the spare room for Rias. After having set up the spare bedroom, both of them were now in the living room, relaxing on the couch while wearing something comfortable. Natsumi was sporting orange shorts with a white t-shirt with floral pattern all over it. Her long hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. Rias, on the other hand, was in black joggers with a plain blue t-shirt. She had let her hair loose. Natsumi was sitting on the couch, while Rias was laying down with her head on the blonde's lap while facing the ceiling, though her eyes were closed in contention. The reason, Natsumi absent-mindedly combing the Redeed's hair with the blonde herself having faint smile on her lips. "I know you have just moved in, but I am really looking forward to having you in the house," Natsumi said in a soft tone. "Me too, Koh-chan," Rias simply replied. A comfortable silence fell around both of them for some time. It was broken by Natsumi, who finally decided to come clean first. "You remember, yesterday, when I said I didn't know what a yokai was?" Rias just nodded. "I was lying. I actually am a yokai," Natsumi added. Rias started, not much surprised by the revelation. "To be honest, I had a hunch that you were lying. I was still hugging you pretty fiercely back then, so I noticed the small change in the heartbeat when my brother mentioned the term yokai. But I figured you will let me know the truth when you feel it's time for me to know. Am I right?" She finished, her eyes still closed. Natsumi chuckled slightly at that. "Yes, you are. But I am pretty sure the next bit I am reveal will definitely shock you." This got the Redeed's attention and prompted her to look up at the blonde woman. "I am a Jubi," Natsumi started, causing Ria's eyes to widen in surprise, a 10-tailed wolf to be precise, from another world. If Rias was surprised before, she was completely flabbergasted by this news. She immediately sat up, surprising Natsumi slightly and turned towards her surrogate mother. "You are not pulling my leg, are you?" she asked. Natsumi chuckled but responded nonetheless, "Nope. I am completely serious." It took Rias some time to process that, especially the part about her being from another world. "How did you end up here, then?" she asked after calming herself a bit. Natsumi started to relay the summary of her life story to her surrogate daughter, starting from her birth, to the Fourth Shinobi War, to the fight with Isshiki, and finally to the circumstances that led her to leave that world behind. Rias had tears in her eyes by the end of it. She was still young and hadn't witnessed the loss of someone precious, so she didn't know what her blonde mother was going through. Redeed just hugged her mother before saying, "I am not gonna leave you, Koh-chan. So you don't have to worry about that bit anymore." She broke the hug before adding, "We devils have really long lifespans, averaging several thousands of years. So, that's one less thing for you to worry about in the future," she finished with a grin, slight tears still streaking down her cheeks. It was Natsumi's turn to be surprised this time, but it also brought a smile and tears of joy to her. After meeting and bonding with the Redeed, she always dreaded what the future might hold, but this information was a welcome surprise for her. She can now just live with the Redeed without having to fear for the future. Rias wiped the tears from her blonde mother's cheeks before proceeding to do the same to her own. "I guess your beautiful hair is my red thread of fate," Natsumi stated with a smile. "I guess it is," the Redeed replied with a smile of her own, "but the way you put it seems like you have borrowed that statement from someone else." Natsumi just smiled before making Rias lie down on her once again and added, "Because I did. It was my mother who said this, as her own red hair had resulted in my father falling in love with her, and vice versa." Natsumi started, surprising Rias slightly. Natsumi continued to tell the story. Her mother had told her all those years inside her seal, while she was trying to control Kurama's chakra. Once she was done, Rias had stars in her eyes. It was the most romantic story she had ever heard. "So, Aji-chan saved Aba-chan by following her red hair?" she asked, mostly to herself but getting a nod from Natsumi nonetheless. "Though, in my parents' case, the phrase, red thread of fate, was mostly used in romantic sense. That might not be the case with us. But that doesn't mean it's not true," Natsumi added. Rias just smiled up at her in acknowledgement. "That's enough about me." Natsumi started glancing at the clock, which showed it was time for dinner already. "I am gonna make some dinner for us. In the meantime, it's your to tell me about this world. I know I traveled the country, but fortunately or unfortunately, I didn't particularly come around anything suspicious. Rias got up from the couch, allowing Natsumi to do the same. They then proceeded towards the kitchen, where Natsumi continued on to make dinner, while Rias started her explanation on devils, fallen angels, yokai and sacred gears. The redeed explained what each of those were and expanded on the big war and the peace treaty that was in place at the moment, as well as the evil peace system, and how she resurrected her whole peerage, and the circumstances surrounding her hidden peace. Is your group the reason the school became co-ed? Natsumi asked while putting some rice and water in the rice cooker. Yes. It was mainly because of Yudo, though, replied Rias. Issei wasn't a devil since a few months ago. I know you must have a good reason, but I gotta ask, why him? Asked Natsumi. Rias, having understood who she was asking about, responded, he was on the verge of death when he summoned me. He had taken a light spear from a fallen angel to the gut. I couldn't leave him for dead, could I? She asked rhetorically, knowing how her surrogate mother would answer to that question. So, I resurrected him, since I couldn't heal him otherwise. And once I was done, I asked Akeno to take him home and heal his injuries. The redeed continued, getting a nod from the blonde yokai. It was a plus when we later found that he possessed the boosted gear, one of the 13 Longinus. Rias shrugged. It was a welcome surprise for the redeed when she found out. So, one of those scared gears that has the potential to kill God? Asked Natsumi while stirring some vegetables, just confirming if she remembered right. Rias nodded, yes. A strong weapon, and it landed in the hands of a pervert, the blonde woman remarked, before looking up from her cooking and looking at Rias, who was sitting at the dining table across from her. He didn't do anything perverted to you, did he? She asked in a tone that promised pain to said pervert if Rias were to reply in the positive. Rias shook her head though, no. I had made it pretty clear at the start that if he were to do something, it wouldn't end well for his future. The implied threat pretty clear to the blonde yokai as well. That's my girl, Natsumi replied with a smile, causing Rias to chuckle slightly at the change in mood. Now, help me setting up the table. The dinner is almost ready, Natsumi asked the redeed, who nodded happily and continued to do the assigned task. Once the table was set, the mother-daughter pair sat down opposite to each other on the 4-seater dining table. The dinner was completed with both people talking about random stuff to fill in the silence. Half an hour later. After dinner, both Natsumi and Rias were cleaning up the dishes they had used for dinner, with Natsumi doing the washing and Rias the drying and setting them back part. And Rias started, getting the blonde's attention. Also ideally noting that it had become quite easier for her to address the older blonde as she did. Was the blonde response, signaling Rias to continue further. Can you train me? I want to be stronger, Rias started. Natsumi didn't say anything, knowing that the redeed wanted to say something further. I know you are always there to help me if I need it, Rias continued while drying up a plate that Natsumi had handed her over. Always, my daughter, replied Natsumi with a smile. But, I want to be of help to you too someday, Rias continued, Natsumi's smile widening at her thoughtfulness. I also don't want to be a burden on you or my peerage. They helped me a lot in my fight against Riser and his group. But I was too weak to finish him off. I don't want to be weak anymore. I want to do everything I can in order to help and protect them as they did for me, as well as you. The redeed added the last bit very quietly, but it was heard by the blonde yokai. Natsumi stopped the washing and looked towards Rias, who was also looking into her eyes. You know, the blonde started, I would have helped you train even if you didn't elaborate. But, I am now even happier with your reason. Just give me a week's time to set things up and then we can start, she completed. Rias jumped up in joy, her hands up in the air, you are best, Kacchan, before she quickly calmed down, and the duo continued to complete the chore that they were engaged in. Time skip. 1 week. For the previous week, Natsumi was busy preparing for the training that she had promised her daughter. Now that everything was ready, the mother-daughter pair, dressed in similar tracksuits and sports shoes, Natsumi's being black and Rias being green and their hairs tied up in a high ponytail, was standing in front of a wall in Natsumi's bedroom. Said wall had an intricate seal etched onto it in the form of a spiral. Natsumi put her hand on the seal and pushed some of her chakra into it, making the seal glow for a second before the glow died down. Come on, Rias-chan, Natsumi said to her daughter, grabbing the redeed's hand and leading her into the wall. What waited on the other side of the wall was a big stretch of green meadows with a log cabin built onto the shores of a huge lake. Rias could see a forested area in some distance, as well as some hills in the distance. Though, when she looked up, she found that instead of the sky, the whole place was covered by purple clouds. Natsumi squeezed the redeed's hand gently, getting her attention. This place is a pocket dimension that I created for your training. Rias just nodded in understanding. We will be here for around 1 year, Natsumi added. This surprised Rias, but what about school? And my family and peerage? I didn't mention to them I would be gone for this long. Well, for them, you will just be gone for around a day, Natsumi added, trying to ease the redeed's worries. Though, she just got a tilt of confusion in return. You see, time moves differently in this dimension. 1 year in here equates to just 1 day in the real world, the blonde Yokai explained further, getting a nod of understanding in return this time. This is the first time I am in a dimension where time moves differently, Rias commented. This should give us enough time to get you strong enough, smiled Natsumi. Before we start, Koh-chan. Can I see your real form? Rias asked, seemingly out of the blue. I have been curious ever since you told me that you were a Jubi no Okami. I just never asked as I knew you had that power sealed to mostly go incognito, right? Natsumi nodded in the affirmative. You are so smart and understanding, my daughter. You are right. It hasn't even been a century since I became a Yokai. So, my new body hasn't reached its prime yet. As a result, my chakra and my power in conjunction has continued to grow rapidly. You remember seeing this before, right? Natsumi raised her right hand, the back of it towards Rias, and channeled some chakra into it. A seal glowed in the form of number 11 on her hand. Rias nodded. You unsealed the first level in the fight with Riser. Yes. You see, just removing the first level releases what is my base power. Natsumi continued her explanation, which has grown to the point that it is now equal to the entire power I had acquired when I first became a Yokai. This got raised eyebrows formed the redeed. I could feel that power all the way in the Gremory Castle from that other dimension. Natsumi nodded, though, I am pretty sure what you guys felt wasn't even a fraction of what I unleashed. Rias nodded in understanding. I think I understand why. The two dimensions only had a really small opening between them for the match to be observed. I am guessing only a small portion of the power was felt through that small crack. Though, from what I could tell, we were feeling the energy equivalent to an ultimate class devil. To think you were stronger than even that and in just your base, she commented. Again, you are right. If I were to guess, based on what you have told me earlier, I would say I could rival your brother in terms of power by just removing the first seal, Natsumi stated in a serious tone. I don't doubt that, Koh-chan. So, I was right in not asking you earlier. What about now? We are in a separate dimension right now, asked the redeed, curious as to see how her surrogate mother would look. I can show you now. But just be careful though. To continue the explanation of the seal, each level I unseal releases a part of my Yokai lineage and it also doubles my power from the previous state. So, I want you to stop me and let me know anytime you feel uncomfortable, okay? Natsumi asked the redeed, getting a nod in return. Here goes nothing. Then Natsumi started before muttering, Seijin Shiru. All levels. Release. The seal glowed for a moment and the number changed from 11 to 0. As soon as that happened, Natsumi was covered in blinding light and a huge gush of wind released outwards from her position due to the release from her power. Rias erected a barrier in front of her in order to protect herself from the wind and also covered her eyes from the light. After a few moments, feeling the wind and light die down, Rias opened her eyes, disarming the barrier, and looked onto the place where her surrogate mother was standing. Natsumi still occupied her place, but she now had 2 golden wolf ears on top of her head instead of the normal human ears, and the major change was the 10 longer than normal fluffy golden wolf tails that were now dancing freely behind her back, having raised her tracksuit jacket and trying to get free. Her eyes were no longer her usual blue, but had morphed into the Rinshuriken. I tried my best so as to not let my power loose. You are not feeling suffocating, right? Natsumi asked the redeed, worried for her safety. Rias just continued to look without replying for a good minute, worrying Natsumi even more. But before she decided to seal the power back, Rias replied with stars in her eyes, so cool, Koh-chan, causing Natsumi to sigh from relaxation that her daughter was fine. Rias moved towards her mother figure, before circling towards her back looking at her tails, before grabbing one of them gently and stroking the golden fur. It's so soft, she commented, getting a chuckle from the blonde on how she was acting. And your energy is still warm like usual. Though I can't even feel your power anymore, Rias said in confusion before adding, you might even be stronger than the top 10 beings of the world, maybe in the same league as the 3 beasts. Natsumi on her part just smiled, maybe not, she started, we haven't met them, so unless we do, we can't be sure, she commented. Rias came back to stand in front of her surrogate mother, having left her tails alone. It was now that she noticed the change in her eyes. Are these the Rinshuriken that you mentioned earlier? She asked, getting a nod in return. They look much cooler than their description sounded. This got another chuckle from Natsumi before she raised her right hand again, channeled chakra into the seal before muttering, Seijin Shiru. Level 10. Seal, sealing most of her chakra away again. She glowed for a second, her wolf ears and tails retracting with the ears replaced by her human ones. And she deactivated her taijutsu. It's now time to start your training. Natsumi stated after the sealing was complete. This got an excited nod from Rias, who was excited to start as well. We will be focusing on all areas, physical, magic and mental. Natsumi started before fishing out a pair of black wristbands and a matching pair of ankle bands from her pockets and handed them to Rias. Wear them. Rias did as ordered, noticing some strange symbol in white on all 4 bands and an extra one on her left wristband. Once she was done, Natsumi grabbed her right hand, pointing to the symbol. This is a seal designed to imitate weight, she explained, getting a nod in return. Natsumi then proceeded to take the Riteed's left hand and pointed to the other symbol. This seal imitates gravity, getting another nod. Once activated, the weight seals will display the numerical weight in kgs, while the gravity one will display multiplication factor that the gravity around is currently set to, with 1 being Earth's normal gravity. Natsumi continued her explanation. Rias had her attention on the seals, while also listening to her surrogate mother, slightly marveled at how just a few symbols could imitate not just weights, but an entire dimension. Only I will be able to activate and deactivate these seals, as they require my chakra to function, Natsumi continued, getting Ria's attention back to her and a nod of acknowledgement, stating she was listening. You will be wearing those for the entirety of our training, only taking them off when we spar, so as to get you used to the feeling of them not being there, for times when you will have to take those off. Also, even when the training is done, you will continue to wear these unless I say otherwise, or you are in life-death battle. Am I understood? Asked Natsumi, in a sensate tone. Hi, Kachan, Rias replied. Natsumi nodded before she continued to set the weight seals to 5 kilograms per band and the gravity seal to 2x Earth's gravity. Rias felt really heavy right now. I can't even move, Kachan, she commented, while sweating hard, trying very hard to move, but failing. We will increase the levels once you get to your regular speeds, increasing the difficulty, stated Natsumi. Just so you know, it pains me as well seeing you like this, but this is the fastest method to make you stronger, she added with a frown. I know, Kachan. And I also know that you are only doing this for my sake. I will give my all in order to meet your expectations, Rias replied, determination evident in her voice before she finally took her first step forward. I know you will, my daughter. I know you will. Natsumi smiled fondly at her daughter's determination. Time skip. 1 year day. Natsumi's bedroom. A seal in Natsumi's bedroom glowed before Natsumi and Rias walked out of the wall. Natsumi was wearing a white tank top with black joggers and black sports shoes. Her long blonde hair was tied in a high ponytail. Behind her, Rias was wearing red shorts and a black t-shirt, along with black sports shoes. Her hair was also tied in a high ponytail. She was also wearing the black wrist and ankle bands that Natsumi had given her on her first day of training. The difference being, all the 4 bands now displayed the number 510, while the left wristband also having an extra number 6 on it. Neither of them looked a day older than when they entered the dimension in the seal, thanks to their lineage. Rias, on her part, had developed slight muscle to her arms and legs. Her devil lineage preventing her from gaining too much muscle mass. It was a year full of hardcore training for the Riteed. It was only thanks to her devil lineage and her surrogate mother's healing abilities that she able to make much progress in her strength. Shall we go out to celebrate? Natsumi was the first to speak, turning around to meet the eyes of her daughter. Sure. Raymond. Rias asked, having developed an appetite similar to her surrogate mother for the noodle dish, having lived an entire year with her. You read my mind, Rias-chan. You go, get a bath and get dressed and I will do the same. We will go then, replied Natsumi with a smile. Okay, Rias replied, simply running off to her room to get ready. Natsumi continuing on to do the same. The next day. After school hours, Natsumi was in the infirmary getting ready to leave for the day when Rias barged in, getting a raised eyebrow from the blonde. Her surrogate daughter normally was really polite at school. I got a reply from my brother, was the only thing she said after coming in and sliding the door shut. Natsumi smiled in joy. She knew what this was about. When the Riteed was summarizing her on the supernaturals of this world, she had asked if she could arrange a meeting with the Yokais, as Natsumi had never met someone who was similar to her. Well, there was Kaneko, but she was a reincarnated devil now. As you said, I asked my brother to contact the leader of the Kyoto Yokai faction, asking for an audience. And I asked him to mention about you, a human with chakra capabilities, to increase their curiosity. Rias started getting a nod in return. It seems, we got them curious, and they have agreed to let you enter their dimension. That's great news, Rias-chan, Natsumi replied back excitedly. Will you come with me? She asked the Riteed. Normally, I wouldn't be able to. Rias started getting Natsumi to drop her smile, but she continued. But, I have been asked by my brother to go as kind of an ambassador. So yes, I will be going too. A smile returned to the blonde's face. Yes. This will be our first trip, just the 2 of us. It's gonna be so much fun. By the way, when are we expected to go? Ani-sama mentioned that we are expected to be in front of the Osaka shrine by noon this Sunday. We will be escorted from there, Rias replied. That's great, we can leave at dawn by the Shinkansen and explore Kyoto before that, Natsumi replied, already making plans on which places to visit and what to do on their visit. Sounds like a plan, Kachin Rias replied. She was excited at the prospect of a fun day out with her surrogate mother. Okay, let's leave then, we have some things to do, Natsumi said, grabbing her bag, ready to leave. You go first, I still have some work at the club, I will join you in a couple of hours, Rias replied. Natsumi just nodded as they left the infirmary and headed outside. Once outside the building, Natsumi turned to the Redeed. Okay. Be safe. See you at home, she said with a smile as Rias just waved to her before walking towards the old school building where the occult research club was located. Natsumi just stared at her retreating form for a couple of moments before she started her walk back towards her home, excited for both the trip and the chance to meet more people like her. Time skip. Sunday. At dawn, Natsumi was at the entrance of her home, all ready to leave for Kyoto. She was wearing blue skin-tight denims with a white tank top. Over the top. She had a full-sleeve black denim jacket over it. Her long blonde hair was tied up in a high ponytail, with the ends of the tail coming down up to her thighs. There were 2 chest-length bangs that were framing her face, while the short ones above her eyes were left as is, covering some parts of her forehead. She was also wearing black ankle-length boots with medium heels. She didn't had any makeup on, her natural beautiful face, making sure that she didn't need any cosmetics. A large black lady's handbag hanging from her shoulder completed her look. Rias-chan, hurry up, she shouted from the doorway, else, we are gonna miss the train. Just a sec, she got a reply from her surrogate daughter. And in a couple of moments, said daughter was out. She was wearing a peach-colored sundress that had thin straps for shoulders and a red belt around her slim waist. The dress came down to her knees. She also had a red jacket over on top of her dress with her hair flowing freely behind her. She wasn't wearing the training wrist and ankle bands as Natsumi had asked her not to, as it had been some time since she had taken them off and her blonde surrogate mother wanted her get a feel of her body without them from time to time. Come on, hurry up, it's half an hour walk to the train station, Natsumi said. We are on time, Kachan Rias started as she reached the doorway and started to put on her peach-colored medium-heeled billy shoes, and even if we were late, we could just teleport, she added, looking up at her surrogate mother, having finished putting on the shoes. Where is the fun in that, Natsumi replied back cheekily before they exited her home and started walking towards train station, talking about the things they could do while in Kyoto. Half an hour later, both of them were sitting side by side on the Shinkansen, which had departed the Kuoh station towards Kyoto. It was only an hour-long ride. Rias had fallen asleep as soon as the train started, having woke up really early in order to leave for Kyoto. Natsumi had insisted on using normal human transportation instead of just teleporting, saying it would be more fun. She was resting her head on said blonde surrogate mother's shoulder. Natsumi could only smile seeing the Redeed's sleeping face and adjusted slightly so as to make it more comfortable for her. Once they were about to reach, she nudged Rias, gently waking her up. We are almost there, Rias-chan, she said softly. Rias opened her eyes, blinking a couple of times and straightened herself on the seat. She stifled a yawn as they were in public and continued to set her hair a bit. The train soon stopped at the Kyoto station, where the surrogate mother-daughter pair off-boarded the train and continued on to exit the station. Once outside, Natsumi fished out her phone from her pockets, looking at the time. It is 8 o'clock now, Rias, she started, that gives us 4 hours before we have to meet the escorts at Yasaka Shrine. Where would you like to go first? She asked the Redeed. Let's start with Fushimi and Nari Taisha, Rias replied after thinking for a minute. Okay, nodded Natsumi. The pair spent the next couple of hours sightseeing across Kyoto before they decided to visit a nearby cafe for some breakfast. After which, the next hour was again spent on sightseeing. It was about 15 minutes before noon when they reached their final destination for the day, Yasaka Shrine. They continued to explore the shrine. At noon, they made their way towards the entrance, where they found 2 foxes looking towards them. They have chakra, Rias. Natsumi started gesturing towards the foxes. I guess, they are our escorts. Rias just nodded and the pair made their way towards the foxes, who just nodded at them and motioned them to follow them. The foxes then led the females towards a secluded part of the shrine before they transformed into human-like beings. Both of the foxes were males. They were wearing plain white kimonos with wooden traditional sandals. They had reddish-orange fox ears and a matching tail. One of them had brown shoulder-length hair and black eyes, while the other had black hair and black eyes. Neither of them had any facial hair. It was the raven-haired one that spoke. I am assuming you are Rias Gremory and Natsumi Uzumaki, getting nods from both of the females present. We have been tasked to escort you to meet our leader. It was the other guy who started this time. We will be teleporting to Kyoto now. Brace yourselves, he warned before he formed a ram sign with his hands, activating the teleporting technique. All 4 people vanished in a flash. In Kyoto. We are in Kyoto, announced the brown-haired escort. Natsumi blinked twice, looking around, making sure she was seeing right before she decided to ask, are you sure? It seems like the same place we were in earlier. The escorts both nodded before the brown-haired one answered, yes, we are. Kyoto resembles Kyoto, hence the reason they seeming similar. Let's go, Yasaka-sama is waiting, the black-haired escort said, not giving Natsumi any time to question further, and started moving. Natsumi and Rias followed as led, walking side by side. The brown-haired guy joined behind them, making sure they didn't wander off on their own. While walking through the streets, the surrogate mother-daughter pair were looking around, observing the different kinds of yokai gathered at the place. Even for Rias, she hadn't seen so many different yokai at the same place. There were people with features resembling that of foxes, dogs, raccoons, monkeys, horses, goats, snakes, etc. They all look so different from each other, Natsumi whispered to her redeemed daughter, getting a nod in return. But they all look wary of us, noticed Rias. Natsumi nodded, that is expected. I am a human with chakra, well you are a devil. On top of that, we are being escorted. Obviously they seem wary. Well, when you put it like that, Rias chuckled slightly. They soon reached the entrance of a large palace, the only place that seemed different from regular Kyoto. It was an impressive construct, styled in the traditional Japanese style, and actually blended in well with the rest of the attractions of the place. They stopped at the entrance, the escort speaking to the guards for a minute before they were cleared for entry. Once inside, they were being escorted through the halls. Natsumi and Rias were marveling at the traditional decorations, unlike the ones at the Gremory estate, which was very European in design. Rias-chan. You must be ecstatic seeing these, being a fan of Japanese traditions, Natsumi said to the redeed. Rias just nodded, yes I am, she replied curtly, trying not to fangirl over the style. Natsumi chuckled at the short response. Rias' tone clearly meant that she trying her hardest not to just wander off and see these artifacts up close. The guys in kimonos were escorting them to where Natsumi believed their leader resided or worked at. Though, they were still in the hallway when Natsumi felt the biggest chakra signature she had felt since coming to this world, alerting her somewhat. She looked ahead towards a corner at the end, from where she could sense the approach. Soon enough, a blonde woman emerged from that corner. She appeared as a young woman with a voluptuous figure and very long blonde hair with matching eyes. She had delicate facial features, and her eyebrows are cut very short and round. Her hair was tied in a loose ponytail, reaching all the way down to her legs, ending in a spiral, with taut bandages to keep it in place. She was wearing a traditional shrine maiden attire, and over that she wore a white coat held close by a red ribbon and a golden crown. She also had a pair of golden fox ears atop her head, with 9 matching golden furred fox tails swishing behind her. The 2 escorts bowed in recognition of their leader, Yasaka-sama. They addressed at greeted her. Yasaka greeted them back, asking them to straighten up. I am assuming these are our guests. She asked the escorts, looking at the surrogate mother-daughter pair. Yes, they are, the escorts replied before they were dismissed. My name is Natsumi Uzumaki. Natsumi started introducing herself, and this here is my surrogate daughter Rias Gremory. She continued on to introduce the redeed, before both of them bowed slightly in greeting. It's a pleasure to be able to meet you, and I am grateful to you for agreeing to meeting us. It's my pleasure to meet you too, Uzumaki-san, Gremory-san. I am Yasaka, the leader of Kyoto, and an extension of the Kyoto Yokai faction. Yasaka introduced herself. I was also curious to meet you. We have never seen a human who had chakra before, and I sure can sense some in you. I am an exception, I guess. Natsumi chuckled slightly. Considering this is not a diplomatic affair or anything, would you like to continue our conversation while I give you guys a tour of the palace? Asked Yasaka. She might be the leader of the yokai, but she seems really humble, though. Natsumi in slight surprise, normally leaders are not like this. If you are fine with that, then we are too, Natsumi replied before adding, actually, my daughter here might be really ecstatic with this suggestion considering her love for traditional Japanese culture. Rias blushed with embarrassment at her secret love being exposed, getting a chuckle from Natsumi at her reaction. Oh my, Yasaka too chuckled. Then, let's do that. Yasaka then took the pair to the tour of the palace, while they continued to talk about things, filling in each other's curiosity, without giving away too much information. Rias, on the other hand, was mostly busy admiring the architecture and the decorative artifacts of the palace. Once the tour was over, the trio proceeded towards the center of the palace, which housed a really big garden. The garden also had a plaza built at the center with a circular table and 4 chairs accompanying it. The European-style plaza unexpectedly looked at home in a traditional Japanese palace. Yasaka went into the plaza sitting on one of the chairs, motioning Natsumi and Rias to do the same. They took seats opposite to the blonde leader sitting side by side. She then asked one of the maids to serve tea and refreshments. I didn't expect something like this in this palace. Surprisingly, it was Rias who spoke up. She had mostly kept herself out of the conversation till now. Well, I saw it in one of those Western movies, historical movies, and just had to have one maid, Yasaka replied truthfully. The maid had returned in the meantime with a tray full of refreshments and tea, which she served to the 3 people before laying down the snacks and sweets she had brought along. The 3 continued to converse over tea. Mama, the 3 were interrupted by the voice of a small girl. The three looked at the entrance of the garden to find a small blonde girl running over towards them, with a couple of maids dressed up in white shrine maiden dresses behind said kid. She was a young girl around 5 or 6 years of age. She had golden, blonde hair like Yusaka's tied in a ponytail and matching eyes. She also has 9 golden fox tails and matching ears. She was wearing a traditional Maiko outfit. The sleeves of her haori featured a giant red star-shaped pentagram, surrounded by 5 smaller pentagrams in between the points. Natsumi noticed Yusaka's lips curving up in a small smile at seeing the girl. The Yokai leader placed her teacup on the table before getting up and walking towards the girl running towards them. She scooped up the girl in her arms when they met in the middle. The little girl wrapping her arms around her neck. The maids, having reached the same point, bowed to their leader. "We are really sorry, Yusaka-sama. We tried to stop her as you were busy with guests, but we failed." Yusaka shook her free hand. "It's fine. No harm done," she smiled. "You guys are dismissed for now. I will keep her with me," she added, dismissing the maids. Yusaka made her way towards the plaza again, sitting down on her chair, setting the blonde girl on her lap. "This is my daughter, Kuoh," she started introducing the young girl who was looking curiously towards the 2 guests. "Nice to meet you, Kuoh." Natsumi smiled at the cute young blonde. "I am Natsumi, and my name is Rias." "It's nice to meet you." Rias finished the introductions. Yusaka nudged Kuoh lightly, speaking to her in a motherly tone. "Introduce yourself, Kuoh." "Hello, my name is Kuoh," the little girl replied in an adorable baby manner as expected of the kid her age. "She is really cute." "How old is she, Yusaka-sama?" Natsumi asked, picking up a cookie from one of trays and offering it to the cute little girl. Kuoh looked up at her mother for confirmation, who just nodded. She then happily took the cookie and started munching on it. "She will be 6 in a couple of months," Yusaka replied. 6, huh? She is really young, Natsumi replied back, glancing slightly at the retreat at her side, a thought passing through her mind. "She is at the age where they start making all kinds of trouble," she added, smiling softly, remembering Himawari when she was at that age. "Yes. She has started on that," Yusaka chuckled, "but those troubles are adorable on their own." "Yeah, you are right on that part," Natsumi responded back. "You seem to be speaking from experience." Yusaka questioned the other blonde adult. Natsumi just smiled in response. "Well, I did have a daughter." "Oh, I am sorry for bringing it up," Yusaka apologized, having picked up on the use of past tense and dropped the subject. They then continued to chat till evening, playing with little Kuoh in between chatting. Natsumi was also giving Ria some curious glances from time to time. "I guess it's time for us to leave. It's getting late." Natsumi started. "Thank you again for agreeing to meet with us," she thanked the blonde leader. "I was happy to meet with such an extraordinary person, as well as such a good-mannered young devil," Yusaka replied with her own smile, getting one from each of the 2 guests. "Also, it's not every day I get a day off from paperwork," she added, chuckling, getting one from Natsumi as well. "The Bane, right?" The blonde nurse answered back. "Yeah," Yusaka simply replied while still chuckling. They got up from their seats and proceeded towards the entrance exit of the palace. Yusaka had called for some escorts along the way to see the 2 guests back to the human world. Kuoh had fallen asleep in her mother's arms on their way out, having gotten too tired from the day. Once they were at the entrance of the palace, "It was really fun to meet you too. Feel free to visit again," Yusaka waved with a smile. "We will, if you will have us," replied back Natsumi with her own wave. "Thank you for meeting us, Yusaka-sama. And have a good night," Ria said, waving as well. The surrogate mother-daughter pair then left with the escorts who returned them to the human world. Kyoto. Once back, the pair thanked the 2 escorts before deciding to head to the train station in order to return to Kuoh. The journey to Kuoh was mostly uneventful, with the duo talking about what they liked most in their day. Kuoh. Uzumaki residence. By the time they reached home, the sun had already set. They proceeded to take a bath and change into something comfortable. The 2 were sitting on the couch, side by side, in the living room watching some movie on television. They had decided to order something for dinner, too tired to prepare it themselves. They were waiting for their order to arrive. Natsumi was wearing black shorts with a plain orange t-shirt while retaining her hairdo from earlier in the day. Rias, on the other hand, was sporting pale blue shorts with red t-shirt. She had her hair tied in a loose low ponytail. While watching TV, Natsumi continued to give curious glances towards the retreat. Rias had noticed her behavior some time ago but hadn't commented on it. Though, her curiosity got the better of her, and she started getting Natsumi's complete attention. "I have been noticing this from some time, but why are you glancing at me from time to time?" Natsumi chuckled nervously, having been caught, but decided to out with her thoughts anyway. "You see, she started, ever since seeing young Kuoh, I have been curious as to how you looked when you were her age," she admitted. Rias answered back simply, "That's it. I was thinking it might be something big. I don't have any pictures with me at the moment, but we have an album back at the estate. I can ask for them and have them delivered tomorrow," she added. "I can't wait till tomorrow," Natsumi whined before a light bulb went up inside her head. Do you remember when I told you about the technique that allows me to look at someone's past from a third person's perspective? Natsumi asked the Redeed, who simply nodded, remembering her surrogate mother telling her about it when she was training her. Can I use that on you? I promise that I will only at you from when you 6, nothing else, Natsumi pleaded. You can look at my whole past and I won't mind a bit, Koch-an. Rias replied with a warm smile, so sure, you can see. Thanks a bunch, Rias-chan. But still, I want to respect your privacy. So I won't see anything else. I know you will let me know if I need to know it, Natsumi replied, before channeling some chakra into eyes, morphing them into the Rinnegan. Rias had seen those eyes multiple times during their training. She was still amazed at how much those eyes could do and how much cool they looked on her surrogate mother. Hoki no Maiko. Keiko. Natsumi whispered the name of the technique while focusing on Rias. As promised, she only witnessed a small part of the past when Rias was 6, and that too just one memory of when she playing in the garden. She had skimmed through the rest so fast that even she could not make heads or tails of it. Having seen enough, she cut off the chakra to her eyes, disabling the technique and reverting the Rinnegan back to her normal blue eyes. You were so cute, she said gently, cupping Ria's right cheek with her left hand before another idea popped in her head, making her giggle in a creepy way. The giggling caught Rias off guard and she leaned away from the blonde. What are you thinking? She asked warily. Natsumi, instead of replying, went through a couple of hand signs before touching Ria's forehead with her index and middle fingers, surprising at her mother's actions, and whispered, Henge no jutsu. The cloud of smoke covered Ria's for a few seconds. When it dissipated, in place of teenage Ria's was now a 6-year-old version of her. This Ria's had a slightly chubby face due to all the baby fat. Her hands and legs were now small to match a 6-year-old. Her hair had reduced in length and now only reached behind her small back, the ahogs still present. She was now wearing an orange frock with a wolf design, the size of her torso, at the front of it. Rias blinked a couple of times when the smoke died down, feeling different from her usual self, prompting her to look at her hands, shocking her. What did you do, Koch-an? She asked while narrowing her eyes slightly, though it came out as a squeak, even her voice was now different. Natsumi on her part was trying her hardest not to squeal and embracing her surrogate daughter, she was just looking so cute. It's just a technique that I learned. It allows the user to transform into somebody or something else. I can also apply it on somebody else, she started, getting a nod in return. Well, I guess this should settle your curiosity, Koch-an. Rias replied in that squeaky voice again, her shock and surprise and wariness now forgotten. As long as it made her surrogate mother happy, she was fine with anything. Rias-chan, can you call me mama when you are like that? Natsumi asked. Mama? Rias questioned back, tilting her head slightly sideways. Natsumi couldn't hold it in anymore. She squealed loudly, so cute, before she scooped up the Redeed and started rubbing their cheeks together. Rias tried to get away from the embrace, feeling slightly embarrassed, but gave up after a couple of tries when Natsumi didn't even budge. The affection she was feeling from blonde brought a smile to her face, which soon turned to giggles. Since Natsumi was happy, Rias decided to play along, refusing to acknowledge that she had started to like the treatment as well. Mama, she said again, getting Natsumi to stop the cheek rubbing and get some distance between their faces. Like cute little Rias-chan, the blonde said before she showered the chibi Redeed with kisses all over her face, all the while getting cute giggles from said Redeed. Time skip. A couple of months. Kuoh Academy, classroom. It has already been several weeks since Rias and Natsumi returned back to Kuoh from their trip to Kyoto. The surrogate mother-daughter duo recently celebrated their first Christmas and New Year together. Luckily, the Redeed didn't have to go home for the festivities, as for obvious reasons the festivals weren't popular with the devils. Natsumi and Rias themselves didn't particularly care about the festivals, but they did enjoy their time together, exploring the dressed-up town. Rias was currently in her classroom sitting at her desk, paying attention to the history lecture that was underway and taking notes at the same time. She was in her uniform, wearing the winter version of it, with full sleeves. If one were to observe her really carefully though, they would find that she wasn't exactly sitting on her chair. In fact, she was hovering just a couple of millimeters above the surface, and if one had the senses for it, they could sense some kind of energy between her and the chair. After her training with her surrogate mother, she had been wearing the weighted wrist and ankle bands daily, and as such couldn't exactly sit on a normal chair without breaking it. So, she was using her energy to form a small platform for her to sit on. It was a similar scenario for her desk. She couldn't rest her hands on the desk, so she was using her arm strength not to do so. Over the weeks, this had gotten so easier for the Redeed that she didn't even look even slightly winded on having to constantly use her energy and strength. Though, it had been hard on the first few days having to constantly pay attention so as to not break school property. At home, it was all fine as her surrogate mother had strengthened the whole house using seals, even before taking the Redeed to the pocket dimension for training, having anticipated this. On her first school day after the training, Rias had accidentally destroyed her desk, having forgotten about the extra weight she was carrying around. It was thanks to her mind-altering magic that she got away without having to explain. And luckily for her, it happened when she was the only devil on school grounds. After that day, she took extra care while she was school or in the club. It was exhausting, but she could see the positive effects of the constant use of her energy had on her stamina and her reserves, so she never complained. Soon, the school bell rang signaling the end of the class and the school hours. Rias, along with everyone in the class, stood up in order to greet the teacher. Once the teacher had left, the Rias started packing her books. Once done, she picked up her bag and left the classroom, walking towards the infirmary before she goes on to the old school building to carry on her work for the day. She passed by a kendo on the hallway, who greeted her with a smile, "See you at the club, but you," which got a nod and smile from the Rias. "Yeah, see you there." It took a couple more minutes for her to reach to infirmary. Once outside the infirmary, she knocked on the door, then slid the door open, having gotten a positive response from the other side, and entered the room. "Good evening," Koch and Rias greeted her surrogate mother having closed the door behind her. "Good evening Rias," Natsumi replied back from her seat behind her desk. "How was your day?" she asked a Rias. The blonde nurse was sporting her usual black knee-length pencil skirt along with a light blue full-sleeved button-up shirt. Her legs were covered by black stockings and black medium-heeled female office shoes adorned her feet. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun with two chest-length bangs framing her face like usual. And like usual, she didn't have any makeup on, and her nurse's coat was hanging behind her chair along with a black blazer. It was not bad. Rias started. The two then continued to enjoy each other's company for some time before Rias had to go to meet her peerage. A couple of hours later. With Natsumi having been done for the day, Natsumi packed up her belongings in her bag, threw her black blazer over her shoulders, slung the white coat over her left arm, picked up her bag and left the infirmary. She waved goodbye to the students she came across as she was walking through the hallways. She soon left the campus, exiting the school gates. But this time, instead of going towards her home, she decided to visit the mall near the train station. Having left the school grounds relatively earlier than usual and Rias being busy with her devil-related work for another couple of hours, the blonde had decided to go look for something for the Rias. Rias' birthday was only a couple of months away, so the blonde wanted to look around for a gift. She hadn't decided yet what she wanted to give her surrogate daughter, hence she was going to the mall, a place with different kinds of shops. A short walk later, she had reached her destination. The first thing she decided to look for were some dresses for the Rias, so she entered a clothing store. It was one of the bigger and popular ones in the mall, and as such had a very large collection. She skimmed through the dresses before one caught her eye. She took it out to take a proper look at it. It was an A-line frock dress with short sleeves. It was blue in color and had a red floral pattern all over the dress. The dress would be about knee-length for Rias as per Natsumi's observation. "It's the same blue as Rias' eyes," she thought absent-mindedly. She took a mental note of the dress, but placed it back, deciding to look for more things. Worst case, she could recreate the dress. Looking through some other dresses, there was another that caught her eye. This one was a red and black checkered shirt dress, around the same size as the blue frock, but this one was full-sleeved. It had white buttons up front and an attached tie-up belt made from the same material as the dress. She memorized the pattern of this dress as well before placing it back and continued to look for other dresses. Though, nothing more caught her eye in the clothes shop. So, she decided to exit the shop and go into a jewelry store next. She looked through the jewelry in the cases. Most of them were too extravagant for an 18-year-old girl. She soon spotted one that she liked though. It was a simple necklace. It had a thin gold chain with a small teardrop-shaped pendant about the same size as the width of her thumb. The pendant had a beautiful red sapphire crystal, slightly smaller than the pendant itself, as a decoration in the middle. Having made a mental note of that as well, she exited the store, nothing apart from the necklace catching her attention. Knowing her surrogate daughter's love for anime, she then decided to visit one of the stores that dealt in anime merchandise. She was looking through the shelves when she noticed a figurine of one of the main characters from Rias' favorite anime Son Goku from Dragon Ball Z. From the looks of it, it was also a limited edition figurine. She hasn't seen this particular one in her surrogate daughter's collection. Hence, she picked it up, deciding to buy it for her. The other things she could create if they got sold out, so she hadn't bought them then, but this is something she didn't want to cheat and create as she knew her daughter cared more for anime figurines than dresses or jewelry. She silently chuckled at the thought. She made her way through to the counter, placing the figurine on it, signaling the shop manager to start the billing process. "Can you please have this gift wrapped as well?" she asked the guy behind the counter. "Sure. I will have it wrapped in no time," the guy replied with a smile. After having the figurine wrapped and paying for it, she thanked him and exited the store, happy with her purchase. She put the figurine in her handbag and decided to head home now. "What should I make for dinner tonight?" she asked loudly to herself, thinking about what to have for dinner. It took her about 30 minutes to reach home. Once she entered her house, the first thing she did was make sure her red-haired daughter wasn't home yet. She then hid the gift she had purchased in her room in a storage seal inside her cupboard. Having done that, she took a quick bath before she started on dinner preparations, having decided to make curry tonight. Time skip. 1 week. Uzumaki residence. Nighttime. Natsumi and Rias were having dinner at the table, sitting opposite to each other as usual. Natsumi was sporting black leggings with a green tank top. Her hair was left loose. Rias, on the other hand, was in white shorts with a pink t-shirt. Her hair was left loose as well. She also had the black weighted wrist and ankle bands on her. Iridiid seemed to be lost in thought though. Having noticed that, Natsumi decided to ask, "Rias?" She called, getting no response in return. "Rias?" She tried again, a bit louder. The second call worked. She had the Iridiid's attention. "Is something bothering you? You seem to be lost in some thought," she continued, a bit worried. Rias started, not sure if she should bring this up, but ultimately decided to out with her thoughts. "Actually, yes, there is," she confessed. Her surrogate mother had always given good advice to her till now, so she decided to lay down her predicament before her. Natsumi simply gestured the Iridiid to go ahead, listening intently on her daughter's problem. "You remember my knight Kibayudo?" Rias asked the blonde. The blonde prince, right?" Natsumi replied back, using the title the schoolgirls had given to the knight. Rias chuckled a little at how her surrogate mother remembers her knight before getting serious again. "You see, Kiba has been acting weird lately," the Iridiid started. "He has been neglecting his duties, doesn't support us on missions, and also seems a bit agitated," she finished. Natsumi sat back a bit. "Did you ask anyone in your peerage if they know something?" "Yes," Rias responded. "Issei said it all started after he showed Kiba a photo from his childhood of him, another boy, and a sword that resembles one of the holy swords." Natsumi knew what it was. She remembered Rias telling her about how she met each of her peerage members. Kiba's story in particular had a resemblance to quite a few people she knew back in the elemental nations, and hence, she had an easier time remembering that. So, that picture brought back his initial desire for revenge. Natsumi asked in a knowing manner, getting a nod from the Iridiid in front of her. "Seems like it." "I am not exactly sure though," Rias admitted. "I don't know how to approach him regarding the whole issue, or how to help him." The Iridiid was sad, feeling helpless for not being able to ease one of her friends and subordinates. Natsumi pondered on the issue for a bit before sighing. It was a similar situation to Sasuke's, though maybe not as extreme in some aspects and worse in the others. "Unfortunately, I don't know the kid well enough to provide a useful advice," Natsumi started, getting Rias to deflate slightly, looking down. "But what I can say is that you should support him," Natsumi added, getting the Iridiid to look up at her in slight surprise. "Assure him that you are with him and will help him in whatever he desires, not only as his king, but also as his friend," she finished. Rias nodded at her surrogate mother. "But you have always taught me against revenge for the last couple of years," she questioned. "Normally I don't condone revenge," the blonde responded, "but taking down this organization will save a lot of futures. So I would say go for it." She smiled slightly. Rias just nodded. "Okay, I will talk to him tomorrow. I hope he agrees to our help. If he doesn't, just beat the help into him," Natsumi replied back nonchalantly with a smirk. "Now that sounds like you," Rias chuckled, getting Natsumi to chuckle as well. The mood being lightened now, they finished their dinner before they both crashed on the couch to catch a movie before calling it a night. Next day. Uzumaki residence. Dinner time. Natsumi was in the kitchen preparing dinner for herself and her surrogate daughter. She was wearing red leggings along with a plain black t-shirt. Her hair was done up in a loose bun with 2 chest-length bangs left loose to frame her face. She was wearing an orange apron with the design of a red spiral in front of it. She looked up at the clock, a bit worryingly. It was already quite late, and her red-haired surrogate daughter hadn't returned home. It wasn't the first time she was this late, but normally, when she was going to be late, she let the blonde know beforehand through a text or a call. That wasn't the case this time. "Let's finish this up quickly and go look for her," Natsumi said to herself before she quickened her cooking pace, nodding to herself. She knew Rias was strong and could take care of herself and her peerage, hence she wasn't too concerned. But that didn't mean she wasn't worried at all. Having finished cooking dinner, Natsumi took off her apron, placing it on the counter, and proceeded towards her to grab a jacket. Having picked up a black jacket from her cupboard, she proceeded towards the exit, put on her sneakers and exited her house, having already decided on her first destination, Kuoh Academy's old school building. A few minutes later. Kuoh Academy. With Rias. Rias and her peerage along with 2 extra girls were staring up at a flying man with 10 black feathered wings. The flying man, who was hovering around 15 meters above the ground, had long black hair, red eyes and pointy ears. He possessed 5 pairs of black wings. He was wearing a black robe with detailed accessories. He had a spear in his hand which seemed to be made out of light. He was smiling arrogantly at the teens below him on the ground, quite confident of his victory. All of the people on the ground had seen better days. They had cuts and bruises scattered across their bodies, their school uniforms having cuts in various places. Apart from Rias and her peerage, there were 2 extra girls with them. One of them had violet eyes and long chestnut hair that was tied into twin tails, each held with a blue scrunchie. She was wearing the standard church battle attire, which consisted of a black skin-tight short-sleeve leotard with pauldrons, matching fingerless gloves that extended to her biceps, and thigh-high boots, all of which were adorned with straps. The other girl had chin-length blue hair with a dyed green fringe on the right side and brown eyes. She was wearing a church battle suit similar to the other girl. She also had a crucifix around her neck. All of them, except Rias, seemed to be out of breath from the fight that had been going on, if their conditions and the condition of the school grounds and building was anything to go by. Rias glanced towards her pawn on her right. "Once you are done building up some energy, share them with the rest of the peerage, okay?" She ordered the brown-haired teen. "Yes, but you," Issei replied obediently, concentrating on gathering energy into the green gem in his gauntlet. Arena and this time, Rias glanced towards the chestnut-haired girl who, while battered like the rest of them, was ready to restart the battle again, already holding her sword in a battle-ready stance. "How are you and Zenobia-san holding up?" she asked. "We can go on for longer." It was the blue-haired girl, now identified as Zenobia, who answered. She was also in a similar stance to Arena. Rias just nodded, getting ready for another bout. Just behind her, her knight Kiba summoned a broadsword using his sacred gear, Sword Birth, and held it in a battle-ready stance. Beside the deed, on her left, was her queen, Akeno, who started molding her energy, ready to strike the fallen angel with a magical blast of lightning. On Akeno's left was her rook, Kaneko, who was currently being healed by the healer of her peerage, her bishop, Asia. "It's only a matter of time, foolish little bats," the 10-winged man started chuckling arrogantly, being assured of his own victory. "Once I kill you all, I will have what I want. Then, we will make sure we take you down." Kakabiel, Rias replied, backing, identifying the winged man as Kakabiel. "We won't let you start another war." How could things spiral out of control so quickly, Rias thought to herself. Flashback summary of the day. It had started like a normal day for her. She woke up, got ready, had breakfast with her surrogate mother before they left for school. Even at school everything seemed normal till she went to the old school building, or the occult research club as they called it, to continue on her devil duties of managing her territory. They had been visited by 2 members of the church, Arena and Zenobia, to let them know that they will be staying in Kuoh to search for the fragments of the holy sword Excalibur, which was stolen by one of the leaders of the fallen angels named Kakabiel, and they didn't want any kind of confrontation with the devils, since it was Ria's territory. Though, Zenobia did try to kill Asia for having been turned into a devil, resulting in a duel between Issei, Kiba, Arena and Zenobia. The exorcists proved stronger and quickly defeated her knight and pawn before departing. In order to soak everything that had been relayed to her, Rias decided to take a shower before confronting Kiba regarding what she happened and what she discussed with her mother the day before. Before Rias had the chance to talk with Kiba, and when she was in the shower, he, along with Issei, Kaneko and Sona's pawn, went after the 2 church girls to offer to help in searching for the sword fragments. Rias and Akeno went after them when she learned about what happened. When they met with the group in the outskirts of Kuoh, they were confronted by Kakabiel himself, along with a scientist named Valper Galilei, who had the appearance of a short, bespectacled elderly man with grey hair, a mustache, black eyes and wore a priest outfit. They somehow ended up at Kuoh Academy, having Chaz the fallen angel and his aide, who had revealed his plan to kill the devils of the academy in order to rile up the new Satans into starting another great war. Sona and her peerage, the student council, erected and maintained a barrier around the school campus so as to minimize damage to the town, while Rias, her peerage and the 2 church girls tried to take down the fallen angel leader. Kakabiel proceeded to reveal the fragments of the holy sword, which the elderly scientist merged into a single sword before using it to attack the group from a distance. Kiba managed to destroy the merged sword, as Valper didn't have much technique in using the sword, and Kakabiel then took out grey-haired scientist, killing him with one of his light swords. The group then tried to take out the fallen angel leader, but failed to do so till now. Current time, Rias was contemplating removing her wrist and ankle bands before they take on the black-winged man. After having sparred with her blonde mother during her training, she could easily see through the fallen angel's attacks, but the added weight resulted in her not being able to keep up. Her surrogate mother had stated clearly though she shouldn't be taking those off unless her life was in danger. And she didn't feel like that was the case till now. Sure, Kakabiel was after her life so as to enrage her brother into starting another war. But she, along with her peerage, had been able to avoid any critical hits while working together to take the fallen angel down. But it didn't seem like they will be able to take him down, and her peerage had been losing stamina fast. She had to make a quick decision. Before she could ponder more though, Kakabiel started again. "This is the end for you." He brought the light spear above his head and reared his hand back, getting ready to throw the spear towards the red-haired devil. "You lowly bats," he finished. And just as he was about to throw the spear, a voice interrupted him, "How dare you insult my Rias-chan, you black-winged rooster." Everyone looked at the source of the voice, who was revealed to be a blonde woman with hands on her hips and glaring up at the fallen angel, as if to admonish the man for insulting her daughter. But Natsumi, a couple of minutes back, Natsumi was walking towards the academy in a brisk pace. She was just several hundred meters away when she sensed some kind of barrier around the school grounds. She increased her pace, now sprinting towards the school grounds. She activated her Mangekyo and spread out her senses in order to get a feel of the situation. Once sensing the energy of her surrogate daughter, she sighed, releasing a breath of relief. Once she was in viewing distance, she saw a barrier around the school. Once in front of the school, she muttered "Kamui" before she phased through the barrier and deactivating her Dijutsu, noticing her daughter, her peerage, two unknown girls and a flying man with black wings who just insulted her daughter while trying to throw what looked to be a light spear in her direction. Her in time, "Kaka-chan." Rias stammered. Not expecting her surrogate mother to be here. That went mostly unnoticed by everyone as they were too busy being shocked from the appearance of their sensei. Natsumi on the other hand heard the deed, turned her attention to her, and replied, "I was getting worried since it's already dinner time. So I came looking for you," she finished with a smile. Before anyone could say anything though, Issei started, "Good thing you are here, sensei." Getting the blonde nurse's attention, he pointed towards the flying man, "Is after us. Can you take care of him?" He asked the blonde woman as if he was complaining about his student. This caused the two church girls even more surprise. From what they could tell, the blonde woman was only a normal human. "Ha ha ha ha, a human, take care of me, ha ha ha." Kakebia laughed arrogantly from his position. Natsumi looked up at the fallen angel and glared at him again, "You insulted someone I love, and now you are going to pay for it, you rooster, and you will make me pay." Kakebia shot back, still laughing at what he considered a joke. "No," Natsumi started, getting surprised looks from everyone on the ground. "My cute little Rias-chan will do it," she finished before she turned to Cedric, who was trying her best to fight back the blush of embarrassment that was coloring her cheeks, having been called affectionately by her mother in front of her friends. Rias. Natsumi turned serious, causing Rias to do the same, her embarrassment forgotten for the time being. "You have my permission to take those off weights," as well as the limiter nodding towards her daughter. This confused everyone even more, except Rias, who knew what her mother meant and just nodded with a smirk. "And make a spectacle out of it," Natsumi added with a smirk, getting a matching one from the deed. Rias crouched down, taking the ankle bands off, but still holding them. She then sprouted her wings from her back and began to float up. Everyone was looking at her as she climbed higher, a bit confused. They didn't think getting some weighted bands off was going to make much of a difference. "Nu," Issei cried, suddenly catching everyone off guard. "Why but you? Why the shorts?" He cried comically, expecting to see the deed's underwear when she started floating up, but saw that she was wearing magenta-colored shorts under her skirt. "It was a perfect chance for me to see what kind of underwear you wear," he continued, getting everyone, except Natsumi and Rias, a sweat drop at his antics. Ria's eyebrow was twitching, "Not on his head, not on his head," she thought to herself, trying to stop herself from not dropping the weights on her pawn's head, lest he bleed to death from a head injury, provided his head doesn't get crushed from the weight. Natsumi, on the other hand, was furious. "Issei-kun," she began in a sickly sweet voice laced with some killing intent, getting Issei to stop crying from the dread he was feeling. "Is something the matter?" she asked, smiling sweetly, too sweetly. Issei just shook his head, too afraid to look at his teacher's direction. Natsumi stopped the flow of her killing intent aimed at the brown-haired pervert and focused on Rias again. "It's a good thing I forced her to increase the length of her skirt slightly and wear shorts underneath when the school converted to co-ed," she thought to herself, slightly proud of her judgment. Rias continued to climb higher, and once she was on the same level as the fallen angel, she stopped. She then took off the wristbands while staring Kakebia in the eyes, tying them together along with the ankle bands, and then dropped them straight down. The bands shook the ground slightly after hitting it and kicked up a lot of dust from the impact. Once the dust settled down, everyone could see that the bands were lying in a small crater in the ground. The impact got comical surprise reactions from everyone present except Natsumi, who just laughed at their reactions. Rias too glanced at the reactions she got from her peerage and the fallen angel general. "You were right, Nat-sensei," she chuckled, "their reactions are hilarious." "I know, right?" Natsumi grinned back. She had asked Rias during her training to try to make a spectacle of taking off the weights, as it would get funny reactions from everyone present. After all, the blonde still remembered the day that her fellow shinobi, Rock Lee, had taken his weights off at the Chunin exams and the reactions he got from everyone when those things dropped in the floor. "How much do they weigh?" It was Irina who asked first, getting out of stupor first. Natsumi looked closely at the bands, specifically at the numbers displayed, before replying nonchalantly, "Around 12 tons. The peerages as well." The church girl's jaws dropped again, causing Natsumi to chuckle again. Bakabiel, on the other hand, was now starting to get serious, knowing full well it was not going to be easy. Rias on the other hand brought her right hand over her chest where her heart would be. A red light shone brightly between her heart and chest before an overwhelming power started radiating from the redeed. Rias readied her trump card thinking back on how she developed it with the help of her surrogate mother. Flashback. Training year. 10th month. It had been 9 months since Natsumi had started training Rias. For these months, Natsumi had mainly concentrated on her physical prowess along with close combat skills while trying to increase her stamina and energy reserves. It was only in the last week that the blonde mother had started on the redeed's energy manipulation after having increased her reserves to a point she deemed necessary. Natsumi didn't know exactly how magic functioned, but she could help the redeed in her raw energy manipulation. They were currently near the small boulder about a meter in diameter. There was a can of Coke on top of it. Natsumi and Rias were in matching black tracksuits and hair tied in a braid. Rias had her black wrist and ankle bands on as well. Rias was standing in front of the boulder with her right hand extended but unable to reach the can, while Natsumi was beside her overlooking her progress, trying to help her understand the concept. Don't think of it as a weapon, Rias, she admonished the redeed lightly, who tried and failed again to do what the blonde was trying to teach her. Think of it as a part of your body and mold it into doing what you want your hands to do. She added. Rias again called forth her energy in an attempt to mold it again. Flashback end. Current time. Rias closed her eyes and called forth her power of destruction to envelope her from head to toe in a sort of protective but destructive to others, crimson armor, Himetsu no Yoroi, she whispered. The energy enveloping her was much more concentrated and dense and as such more potent than her usual attacks. I can only last about a minute using this. I need to finish this off quickly, Rias thought to herself. She had only trained for the last 3 months of her year-long training and development and use of this technique. The first months having been spent in increasing her reserves to even be able to hold the technique for a few seconds. Right now, she could hold the technique for a minute, after which her reserves were completely depleted and she was vulnerable. That was the reason Natsumi had asked her to use the technique as a trump card, as a last resort, once everything else failed. Rias, Natsumi started, loud enough for everyone to hear. Give him hell, she finished with a smirk, getting a matching one back from said redeed. The redeed leaned forward slightly and blasted off towards Bakabiel, who barely had time to react before Rias was at him with a fist cocked back which she landed successfully on his face, launching the black-haired fallen angel into the ground. To the onlookers, except Natsumi, Rias had seemingly vanished, and the next time she was visible, she was hovering where Bakabiel initially was, while said fallen angel was sent to the ground. Did anyone see what just happened? Kiba asked the rest of the peerage, getting a collective no from everyone. He was the fastest one out of all of them, well now second fastest, and even he couldn't see. All the while, Natsumi, the only person there who was following the fight, watched it with a smile on her face, confident that her surrogate daughter could defeat the fallen angel. On the other side of the ground, Bakabiel got up from where he had landed, spitting out some blood. His left cheek was slightly corroded from Ria's power of destruction. While glaring up at the redeed, his light spear having dispersed in that small exchange. He created a broadsword out of his light energy and blasted off the ground towards the red-haired devil. Once in slashing range, he brought the light sword down on the redeed, slashing at her head. Rias dodged the attack towards by moving towards her right, but was swiftly kicked away by the fallen angel, who bit back a scream of his own, having his right foot slightly corroded away from Ria's energy. Rias stabilized herself mid-air, having been launched some distance back from the kick, and smirked looking at the condition of her opponent's foot. Before she could launch herself to attack again though, Bakabiel morphed his sword back into a spear and launched a light attack at the redeed. When the spear was just several feet away from her, Rias raised her hand forward and extended her energy in the form of a big hand, grabbing the spear mid-flight before in the same fluid motion, she twirled once, launching the spear back at its originator at double the speed. Bakabiel couldn't react in time, and the spear sailed past his head, nicking his right cheek but cutting off 2 of his 10 wings. Ah, he screamed in pain at having his wings cut off, but before he could calm himself down, Rias was upon him again. This time, she was slightly above him with her right leg raised straight up above her head. She brought the leg down on him, hitting him in the head with enough force to crack his skull, and her energy armor corroding his forehead, further adding to his injuries. The fallen angel was launched into the ground again. This time, it took him longer to get back up to his feet. Once on his feet, he created another broadsword with his light energy and launched himself at the red-haired devil. Seeing his approach, Rias extended her power of destruction from her right hand in the form of a blade, using the makeshift energy blade to block off the attack from the fallen angel. Bakabiel continued to attack relentlessly, slashing at the redeed, trying to break her guard and cut the redeed down. Rias, on her part, managed to fend off the attacks though. She wasn't as good with blades as the fallen angel, but after having sparred with her surrogate mother, who was much stronger and quicker, she had developed her senses quite well. It was thanks to those senses and her superior strength and speed that she was able to parry the superior technique of the fallen angel. They continued to exchange strikes before Ria's energy blade weakened for a moment from her having to maintain it for so long, and the light sword broke past her defense landing on her right shoulder, sending the Redeed towards the ground from the impact. Rias managed to right herself mid-air and land on her feet on the ground. She glanced quickly at her shoulder, just to confirm that the light energy didn't leave any major damage, and smiled slightly after seeing her shoulder was unscathed. Her power of destruction hadn't allowed the light energy to penetrate through. I don't have much time left, the Redeed thought, now serious. She was running low on energy and was near her limit. I need to finish this off now, she finished her thought. Channeling some energy in her legs, she launched herself off the ground with even greater speed than she had displayed till now. Before the fallen angel knew what happened, she was above him, both her hands clasped together above her, which she then brought down on black-haired man, hammering him right on the same spot she had kicked him earlier, causing the crack in his skull to widen, sending him to the ground again. The black-haired fallen angel got up again though, with much difficulty this time, not wanting to give up. Once he got back on his feet, Rias was in front of him. She raised both her hands, molding her power into two huge hands, before grabbing the fallen angel with both of her energy hands. She put enough pressure using her energy so as crack some ribs, while simultaneously using her destructive energy to corrode his body, further making him scream. She did slow down the corrosion enough so as to not disintegrate him completely. It only took a few more seconds for the fallen angel to pass out from the pain of slow disintegration, and having cracked his ribs as well the bones in his arms. Rias let go of him once he had passed out and deactivated her energy armor. She was about to fall backward from having used almost all of her energy but was caught by someone. She looked up to see it was her surrogate mother who had caught her. Natsumi, seeing her surrogate daughter about to fall, quickly teleported to her location and had caught her. "You did well," Natsumi whispered to the Redeed with a soft smile while supporting her from behind. "I was trained by the best," Rias replied back, having stabilized herself, getting the blonde to let go of her. "That was close. I need to increase the time I can maintain the armor," she added more to herself, but Natsumi heard it nonetheless. "Don't worry," the blonde consoled the Redeed, "you have only started your training recently, you will grow stronger," she smiled knowing of her potential. Rias just smiled back at her surrogate mother. Rias' peerage along with Zenobia and Irina soon joined the surrogate mother-daughter duo. They looked down at the badly beaten fallen angel, who had burn marks all over his body from Ria's power of destruction, with most of his clothes having been disintegrated, only leaving behind rags. He was also bleeding from his head and nose, having taken a fierce kick earlier. His remaining wings were burned badly as well. He was somehow still alive though. Natsumi and Rias turned towards the group, Natsumi asking the two new additions, "Who are you two lovely young ladies supposed to be?" "My name is Irina Shido," the chestnut-haired girl introduced herself, bowing politely towards the elder blonde. "And my name is Zenobia Corda," the blue-haired girl answered, mimicking her partner. "We are members of the Vatican, and we're here in town in search of fragments of a holy sword, which this guy," she gestured towards Kakebiel, "had stolen," she finished. "It is nice to meet you too. My name is Natsumi Uzumaki," the blonde nurse introduced herself with a smile. "I am Kuoh Academy's nurse," getting a confused nod from the two exorcists. Unlike the Redeed's peerage, they were clueless as to how the blonde woman had managed to enter the barrier. Before anything else could be said though, they were interrupted by a male voice. "I guess we were too late." The group looked up to see two men hovering in the air with a hole in the barrier behind them, resulting in cracks all over it before it simply fell apart. The men hovered down slowly. One of them had 12 jet black feathered wings growing out of his back. He was a tall man appearing to be in his 20s with an average build, black hair, golden bangs and black goatee. He was wearing a V-neck maroon long coat with a wide, open high collar that opens up at the hem. The long coat featured 2 black belts around the waist and 4 black bands on each arm, 2 of the bands at the wrist and the other 2 near the elbow. He had gray slacks and brown shoes adorning his feet. The other guy was a handsome young man with light silver hair and hazel eyes. He was wearing a dark green V-neck shirt with a high-collared black leather jacket over it. He was also wearing burgundy jeans with a silver chain drooping down over them and black leather chaps with 3 bands encircling his right calf and black shoes with black buckles. He had wings in the form of blue energy coming out of 2 wide armor-like extensions from his shoulder back. "Azazel-san." To the group's surprise, it was Issei who recognized one of the new visitors. "You know of them, Issei?" Rias asked her pawn, to which Issei nodded, pointing at the guy with 12 feathered wings, the one with the black wings. "He is my most recent client." Natsumi was wary of the strangers. She could sense that the guys were strong, much stronger than the one Rias had just defeated, and as such was ready to defend the group at a moment's notice. When the 2 guys landed, it was the black blonde-haired guy who started. "Hello everyone. My name is Azazel. I am the leader of the fallen angels and this is my protege." He gestured to the silver-haired youngster beside him. "Volley," said protege just nodded in greeting.